What is up, everyone? Today, I have an incredible, completed Manhwa series that you definitely do not want to miss. Our protagonist possesses the power of infinite regeneration. That just makes him a living sandbag for the elite bullies in his class. No matter how gruesome his injuries are, his body miraculously knits itself back together as if nothing ever happened. He endures a living hell every single day. Yet the thought of his hard-working mother gives him the strength to survive this nightmare academy. He knows that graduating from this supernatural institute is his only ticket to securing a high-paying job. He dreamed of providing his family with a better life. But those hopes were brutally shattered on his mother's very own birthday. For some reason, the same thugs who tormented him at school managed to track down her place of work. Over a minor disagreement, they beat her so mercilessly. Vegetative state, pure rage and sorrow transformed this gentle student into a literal monster. 10 years ago, mysterious gates opened and creatures flooded our world. Over time, humans awakened supernatural powers from these monsters, giving rise to the hunters who now protect humanity. However, our main character was not one of those lucky heroes chosen for greatness. Instead of rising to power, he is trapped in a cycle of relentless and heartless beatings. To make matters worse, he has no way to fight back. Forced to let those bastards treat him like a dummy. The leader of these bullies is a powerful hunter, a man capable of manifesting lethal diamonds. Taisu sneers at the broken boy on the ground and cold-bloodedly says, "Don't you dare fall asleep on me yet." This poor soul is Kang Jang. He attends this specialized academy, and his daily torment is fueled by his unique S-rank regeneration ability. It is a top-tier power that can heal any wound. But for Jang, this gift is a curse because every time his body repairs itself, he is forced to endure soul-crushing agony. Even worse, the mechanism of this cursed power eventually leaves behind hideous, permanent scars once his outer bones vanish. Taesu's gang targets him specifically because they loathe those scars and take joy in mocking Jang's monstrous appearance. Neither teachers nor police will intervene, as the government grants special immunity to S-rank students. The only reason Jang endures is for his mother. When he finally returns home, his mother is there. She glances toward the door and smiles. "You're home. Let's eat, son." She then asks, "Was school fun today?" Jang flinches, hesitating for a long moment, before finally nodding. "School, yeah. It was a lot of fun, Mom." But the blood and grime on his uniform betray his lies. His mother's eyes linger on the stains, her expression filled with silent. Unable to meet her gaze, he believes that if he can just survive until graduation, he will finally become a professional hunter. If he tries just a little harder, his ability could earn him The pay is low, but for him and his mother, it would be more than enough. Looking at his mother's calloused hands, Jang truly hoped for a simple, happy life. But those were just the fleeting dreams of a boy on his mother's birthday. Tragedy struck again when those lowlifes beat his mother so savagely, permanent coma. To make it even more infuriating, they had the nerve to claim it was all just a simple accident. It happened when Taesu's group went to the restaurant and saw how young and beautiful Jang's mother appeared. Taesu couldn't help himself and began harassing her. "You're looking pretty sharp, ma'am. How about me? I'm an awakener who can make diamonds." Jang's mother quickly brushed his hand away and spoke politely. "Please keep your hands to yourself." In the scuffle, she accidentally knocked Taesu's phone to the ground. She hurried to pick it up, murmuring, "The screen is broken. I'm so sorry, I will pay for it." But before she could even finish her sentence, the situation turned deadly. Taesu summoned his diamond shards and stabbed her repeatedly. They claimed they tried to suppress their powers, but Jang knew it was a lie. He bit his lip so hard that blood dripped down his chin. His fury so intense that a tooth literally snapped and fell from his mouth. Realizing this was no accident and that those monsters never intended to stop, his rage exploded, and his body finally unleashed its true potential. A short while later, In a desolate area, Taesu's crew stood around looking visibly shaken. One of them, though, asked hesitantly, "We beat that lady pretty bad. What if she actually ends up dying?" Taesu stepped out of a gate and scoffed with pure arrogance. He didn't care at all, claiming the law protects minors, especially elite awakeners like them. Despite this, though continued to hesitate, but Taesu cut him off with a chilling voice. "Hey, do you really think this is my first time breaking someone?" As he spoke those words, his eyes glinted with a truly demonic and cold-blooded malice. At that very moment, a dark figure emerged from the shadows with an eerie voice. "Why did you do it?" Taesu narrowed his eyes at the approaching silhouette and asked coldly, but the stranger kept pressing, demanding an answer. "I asked you why." Taesu grew even more bewildered by the persistent questioning. "What the hell are you talking about?" It was Jang, his voice exploding with all the suppressed rage he had been holding back. "Why did you do that to my mother? You absolute bastards!" At those words, the realization finally hit Taesu. He smirked, his brows arching with malice. "Oh, so that woman was your mother?" She looked so young, though. He showed zero remorse, driving Jang's fury to its limit. Yet the boy was powerless to act. Without warning, Taesu drove a jagged diamond blade. He let out a contemptuous snort. "Damn, I almost hit on her. Being your dad would have been disgusting." At that moment, Jang gripped the razor-sharp diamond shard tightly, ignoring the crimson blood gushing from his wound. In an instant, his gaze turned cold and resolute. Without hesitation, he ripped the blade out, a scar immediately forming over his chest. Jang gritted his teeth, snarling, "You son of a bitch." Seeing this, Taesu did not even flinch. He just scoffed with pure disdain. "Wow, look at you go." With a wave of his hand, he summoned a flurry of those same diamond blades. Taesu did not hesitate, commanding them to strike. Jang took the full force of the onslaught. Pinned down and unable to move, Taesu laughed mockingly. "Who do you think you are?" The looser Jang had no way to fight back and could only endure the agony in silence. Yet he still roared out, "Damn you! You bastard!" Then, in a burst of strength, he shattered every single one. Despite the mounting wounds covering his body, Jang refused to back down. Dragging himself toward Taesu's group. Taesu's group. Taesu clicked his tongue in annoyance. This brat is surprisingly stubborn. Give him a little shock treatment. Standing nearby, though nodded and obeyed. In a flash, his eyes glowed, and a bolt of lightning crashed down. When the light faded, Jang fell to his knees. His body was a map of scars and fresh wounds, riddled with diamond shards. The three men stood there, watching Jang struggle in agony. Finally, Taesu spoke up. "Let us move out, guys." But as Taesu walked past, Jang's hand shot out, grabbing the man's ankle with a death grip. Through bloodied teeth, he hissed, "Where do you think you are going?" This final act of defiance pushed Taesu over the edge. "You annoying piece of trash," he cursed. He encased his fist in diamond and hammered it down onto Jang's shattered frame. Taesu rained down blows, shouting, "You pest! You should have just stayed and protected your precious mother." He poured all his frustration into every strike, uncaring of the blood spraying from Jang's mangled body. Taesu seized him by the throat, raising his fist once more. "Why the hell are you getting mad at me?" In seconds, Jang's teeth were shattered by the brutal force of the diamond-coated punches. Yet he would not surrender, sinking his teeth into Taesu's hand. Taesu froze in shock. Just then, though spoke up. Annoyed by the interruption, Taesu muttered, "What now?" Afraid I will kill him. Though shook his head, his voice laced with concern. "No, a gate has opened." Taesu looked up, and his companion whispered in confusion, though added hesitantly, "We need to report this to him." Suddenly, Taesu smirked. Hold on. Bewildered, Tho asked, "What is it?" Tae-soo simply pointed at the broken Jang on the ground. With a violent shove, he cast Jang into the swirling maw of the blood gate. "I will kill you all," Jang screamed, but the portal's pull was absolute. The last thing he saw was the three bastards standing tall, without a single shred of guilt on their faces. Tae-soo, the leader, looked down with pure contempt. That is, if you actually make it out. Jang was sucked into the void, his body slamming hard against the ground as the pain surged through him, but his eyes burned with a refusal to give up, unwilling to be trapped here while those monsters roamed free. Elsewhere, inside a high-tech base, his voice trembling with worry. The blood gate is a rare phenomenon where the portal turns crimson and no monsters emerge. Information on it is scarce. The reason is simple. No one who has ever entered a blood gate has come back alive. Inside, it is a hellscape where monsters fall like rain. And Jang, a boy without a single offensive power, had been thrown into this meat grinder like a human punching bag. Only his regeneration kept him from the sweet release of death. But the agony was more than any human could bear. With every cycle of healing, jagged soul-like teeth sprouted from his flesh. The pain was like being torn apart from the inside out. The suffering was so absolute that Jang's eyes began to fill with blood. Under the relentless assault of the monstrous horde, his body was slowly torn apart. As time passed, only bleached bones and grisly remains were left scattered across the blood gate. Yet, research suggests a dark fate. The longer one stays inside, the more likely they are to become a monster. Years bled into decades, until the scattered remains within the blood gate were suddenly entwined. Eerie threads of crimson blood. In a macabre dance of flesh and bone, the fragments fused together. Complete entity once more. From a mere skeleton, limbs began to sprout and lengthen. Soon, fresh muscle and skin appeared, looking indistinguishable from a human's. This was only possible because of the overwhelming surges of mana vibrating within the gate. Jang absorbed every drop of that power. Yet, he endured it all for the one soul waiting for him, his mother, who still needed him to exact their revenge. Suddenly, Jang's eyes burned with a new light. Those bastards, led by Tae-soo, were still out there, living their lives without a care in the world. He remembered his mother, left in a vegetative state after the brutal beating they had given her. The humiliation he suffered at Tae-soo's hands, and that man's look of utter contempt. Resolve. Gritting his teeth, he braced himself against the waves of excruciating pain. He didn't care if he became a monster. He only cared about making that bastard Tae-soo pay for every single sin he had committed. With vengeance as his only reason to live, Jang's transformation accelerated. Before long, his muscles began to swell and ripple with unnatural power. His once frail frame was replaced by a towering, hulking physique. A sight so terrifying that even the monsters of the Bloodgate kept their distance. They watched in pure terror as this new, unknown predator suddenly appeared before them. Covered in sharp spikes, with a single, the monster's fear soon turned to bloodlust as they lunged at him. But, by now, fear was a distant memory for Jang. With a cold snort, he unleashed his mana. Alone and undaunted. Several years later, in the heart of the city, a high-profile interview was being broadcast live to the entire nation. The host spoke with excitement. "Welcome to Mr. Hunter. Today, we are joined by the world-renowned S-rank hunters." He praised the trio for their unique charms, mentioning their reputation as kind-hearted volunteers who always lent a hand to those in need. The three hunters chuckled modestly before offering their response. "Ever since we were young, we have always found joy in supporting those in difficult situations. It is our greatest passion. Can you believe that?" Such noble words coming from Tae-soo and his cronies. The host continued. "Next question. There was an incident where you allegedly lost control of your powers. Did you actually harm a civilian? The question caught Tae-soo completely off guard. Recovering quickly, he put on a mask of sorrow and sighed. She was the mother of one of my dearest friends. He claimed they were just immature students back then, and had simply failed to restrain their awakening powers. Looking directly into the camera with a face full of fake sincerity, I have always wanted to apologize to him, but we haven't seen him since that tragic day. I only wish we had one more chance to set things right and see each other again. Suddenly, the studio doors were blown off their hinges. They went flying straight toward Tae-soo and his team on the high stage. Tae-soo reacted instantly, using his ability to deflect the debris. He snarled through gritted teeth. The audience. There is a monster. Sure enough, a massive, spiked foot stepped through the wreckage, each stride making the entire room tremble. A wickedly sharp horn protruded from the creature's head. Tae-soo narrowed his eyes at the beast, his mind racing with confusion, but, in a flash, the creature vanished from sight. When it reappeared, razor-sharp claws were already inches from Tae-soo's face. It was Jang, finally free from the depths of the Bloodgate. Before escaping that hell, he had faced the entire demonic legion alone and wiped them out. Single-handedly, his power had reached unfathomable levels, and with his godlike regeneration, he was practically invincible. Countless monsters had perished by his hand, and now, Jang was finally here to deliver a devastating blow to Tae-soo. His two accomplices watched in horror as Tae-soo was sent flying backward, crashing through the stage for over 10 meters. As those stared at the monster, a chilling realization dawned on him. He recognized the terrifying presence in front of him. He remembered how they had personally thrown that boy into the abyss, certain that he would never return. Yet here stood Jang, a terrifying entity that struck fear into the hearts of all. Glaring at them with pure hatred, he spoke coldly. The other accomplice still had not put the pieces together. "What the hell is this thing?" he stammered in confusion. Before he could finish, Tae-soo scrambled to his feet. "Kill him now." Shaking off his shock, though unleashed a torrent of lightning. In an instant, Jang's entire body was swallowed by blinding electrical arcs. But as the smoke cleared, Jang remained standing tall, completely unscathed by the devastating assault. Mana surged through De Jong's legs as he vanished, lunging forward with explosive speed. Before Tae-soo's horrified eyes, blood sprayed everywhere. De Jong slammed into the nearest lackey, killing him instantly. One down. De Jong turned his cold, murderous gaze, seeing his comrade fall, Tae-soo's last remaining thug. But as the man reached out, Jang's head snapped back. Suddenly, sharp bone spikes erupted from his body. Fueled by pure rage, Jang shattered his shell and lunged. The sheer force was overwhelming. De Jong pinned him to the ground as blood began to pool beneath them. Jang didn't stop. He unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes. Witnessing the carnage, Tae-soo attempted a cowardly sneak attack, but Jang sensed it, his eyes flashing with lethal intent. As Tae-soo's fist came crashing down, Jang raised his hand. He caught Tae-soo's diamond hand in a death grip. Panic set in as the diamond began to crack. Desperate Tae-soo regained his footing and summoned a flurry of diamond blades to strike. The blades pierced right through De Jong, yet he didn't even flinch. Tae-soo stood frozen in disbelief. Despite the swords impaling him, Jang kept walking forward like an unstoppable monster. Covered in lethal spikes, he closed the distance until he was right in Tae-soo's face. Sensing his impending doom, Tae-soo narrowed his eyes and desperately activated his ultimate ability. His body transformed into solid diamond as he launched a frantic assault. His fists, like he wouldn't stop, pouring all his killing intent into every strike. Blood splattered across Tae-soo's diamond skin. Just like years ago, Jang took every blow, offering no resistance at all. On the final punch, De Jong suddenly lunged and bit down hard on Tae-soo's arm. Taezu's eyes turned bloodshot. Refusing to let go, Jang grabbed Taezu's head and shoulder. With a terrifying surge of power, Jang bit clean through Taezu's diamond arm. Taezu's face contorted in agony. In a final act of desperation, he summoned ground spikes to impale. He thought he had finally pinned the monster down. Taezu fled, but a spike caught him in the chest. Jang stepped out of the trap, armed with more spikes. Sensing the overwhelming bloodlust, Taezu screamed in terror. But Jang didn't listen. He continued his slow, methodical march toward his prey. He drove the spikes down ruthlessly. Taezu's screams echoed until the floor was soaked in crimson. Jang used Taezu's own spikes to pin him like an insect, leaving him trembling in a cage of pain. Taezu spat through gritted teeth. "Who are you? Why are you doing this to me?" With eyes burning with resentment, Jang remained silent as he slowly reached for his mask. As the face was revealed, Taezu froze. He began to tremble, his voice a broken whisper. "It's you." He finally recognized the boy they had once broken and left for dead. Now, Jang was back, channeling years of suppressed hatred into a single, devastating fist. He rained blows upon Taezu's face. Every strike was a long-awaited repayment for the torment he endured. Thinking death was too easy, Jang gripped Taezu's throat and raised his fist once more. But this time, his target was Taezu's throat. The blow shattered Taezu's jaw, blood sprayed like a fountain. As Jang finally let go, the once lavish hall was now a gruesome graveyard, littered with the bodies of the fallen. Dismembered limbs and decapitated corpses lay in pools of thickening blood. Amidst the ruins, the perpetrator stood tall, staring coldly at the devastation he had wrought. Watching his monstrous reflection in the rain puddles, a short while later, at the city hospital, cloaked in shadows, Jang stood by his comatose mother's bed. Tears fell for the woman everyone had forgotten. Overwhelmed by the weight of the past 5 years, he finally broke down. He sat drenched in the rain, screaming at the heavens. It felt like his life had finally hit rock bottom, but one fated encounter was about to change everything. A few days later, deep within a dense forest, where a dungeon gate had the bloody corpses of monsters littered the ground. A group of male hunters turned their gaze toward a young woman and spoke up. "Great work, everyone. Especially you, healer. This was your first time deep inside a gate, wasn't it?" Hearing this, the female healer shyly mumbled, "Yes." "Thank you for the compliment." But the moment she finished, a sinister voice, "No, we're the ones who should be thanking you." The healer was struck with confusion as the group of hunters suddenly began to surround her. Closing in step by step, their leader grinned coldly. No one ever finds out what truly happens inside a gate. Paralyzed with fear, she trembled and stammered. But they weren't listening at all. Without hesitation, one of the men ruthlessly pinned the helpless healer to the ground. He sneered with a wicked smile. Depending on the gate's difficulty, it could take a whole month to get out. During that time, please make sure to take good care of us. His words terrified the healer so much that she burst into tears. But suddenly, something flashed through the air, instantly severing the man's head from his shoulders. The gruesome sight left the remaining hunters in total shock. "What the? Who the hell is there?" Though she had just escaped certain doom, the healer was still sobbing hysterically. But when she saw Jang in his monstrous form, an even deeper terror consumed her. The other hunters panicked as well, shouting frantically, "Kill him now!" They unleashed their abilities in a frenzied assault on Jang. But once the smoke and flames cleared, he stood there, completely unscathed. Refusing to back down, an assassin-class hunter lunged forward to strike. However, the moment his blade touched Jiang's body, the man's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Jang struck with blinding speed. In a flash, blood sprayed everywhere as the man's head was torn clean off. The remaining 2 hunters trembled in absolute horror. Impossible. How can there be a monster this powerful in this gate? But no answer came as Jiang struck again, decapitating them both in one swift motion. In the blink of an eye, he had slaughtered the entire group, leaving only the terrified healer shivering on the ground. As Jiang's shadow loomed over her, she scrambled backward, her fear intensifying with every step he took. But suddenly, she caught a glimpse of his face. The healer's emotions finally boiled over, and tears began to pour down her face like a waterfall as she sat there sobbing uncontrollably. A moment later, she looked up and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for saving me." But before she could even finish her sentence, she was cut down. The one who struck her was Jiang. Why did he resort to such cold-blooded murder? To find the answer, we must go back a few days to when he was crying in despair. A sudden voice echoed from behind him. "How does it feel to finally have your revenge?" Kang Jang frowned and whispered suspiciously, "Who are you?" A woman stepped into view and spoke coldly. Her name was Li Yumin. Jiang didn't recognize her at all. Yumin replied calmly, "I monitor everyone who enters the gates." "You've been inside one for 5 years now, haven't you?" His pupils contracted in shock before he lunged at her in a blind rage. In an instant, he was right in her face, roaring with fury. But before he could strike, Yumin's cold voice cut through the air. "I can save your mother." As expected, Jiang's hand froze inches from her face, though his aura had already pulverized everything around them. He glared at her and asked, "What did you say?" Yumin calmly explained, "Your mother can be brought back from her vegetative state, but only by the hands of the world's sole S-rank healer. The only condition is that you must work for me." Jiang watched her intently and asked, "Why should I trust you?" Yumin gave a faint chuckle and replied, "While you were trapped in the blood gate, your mother was kept alive. Do you really think the hospital did that for free?" Jiang hesitated for a long moment before finally asking, "What is it you want from me?" Yumin remained silent for a while, her eyes half closed. Eventually, she spoke slowly. "I need a weapon of overwhelming power." She continued, "Human weaponry is useless against hunters. Some of them possess power that rivals even nuclear weapons. Yet, the monsters emerging from the gates have nearly wiped them all out. The gates remain as interconnected corridors. Nations are now exploiting this to pit their hunters against one another. Peace is a thing of the past. The United States, China, and Russia, they have all become our enemies. But Korea is facing a severe shortage of hunters, making us defenseless against an invasion by Japan. That's where you come in. If we use official hunters against Japan, it would trigger a massive international incident. So, Yumiya needed his help, and in exchange, she would save his mother. Amidst the carnage, a blood-soaked proposal was laid out. Thinking of his mother still fighting for her life in the intensive care unit, Jiang decided to become the monster Yumin needed. After all, wasn't he already nothing more than a monster himself? Days later, within the heart of Japan's government, a stern figure sat at a long table, coldly summoning the defense minister. The subordinate replied instantly, "At your service, sir." The official spoke again, his voice heavy with suspicion. "Explain why every single one of our hunters has suddenly gone silent." This was Prime Minister Hearing this, the defense minister bowed his head low, answering respectfully, "It is my failure. I will locate them immediately." He wasn't just the defense minister, he was Japan's strongest warrior and the rank 1 hunter. Zasek. Moments later, Keiga stepped out with an aura of authority. "Prepare my blade at once." The girl hesitated, her voice trembling with concern. "Will you be heading out alone, sir?" He replied indifferently, naturally. Panic rising, she pleaded desperately, "Forgive my insolence. But the elites sent before were Perhaps you should take a squad with you?" But the moment those words left her lips, Keiga's lethal gaze pierced through her like a shard of ice. He hissed coldly, "Do I look like I need backup?" Terrified, the girl recoiled in fear. "I am so sorry." Soon after, at the dungeon gate, Keiga strode confidently into the abyss. Seeing the scattered monster corpses, he cursed under his breath. Those useless fools. What were they doing? They shouldn't have been able to clear them all. This is Ali. Deep in thought, Kagar ventured further into the darkness. As he reached the end of the path, his pupils suddenly dilated. Something or someone was waiting in the shadows ahead. Well, this is interesting. Kagar spotted Jang sitting atop a gruesome mountain, hunters and fallen beasts. The scene was hauntingly eerie. Upon seeing the mangled corpses of his own countrymen, Kaguya's expression twisted into a mask of pure rage. He instantly unleashed a lethal strike, a wave of frost-cold energy. To Kaguya's shock, the impossible happened. His blade was blocked. Without hesitation, Jang launched a fierce counterattack of his own. Kagar swerved to avoid the blow, his eyes burning with fury as he roared. You dared block me. How intriguing. With a snarl, Kagar slammed a fist into Jang's chest, then the first. Jang staggered back, coughing up a spray of crimson. But Kagar didn't stop, following up with a relentless second strike. A crescent moon of pure energy slammed into Jang. Seeing the boy still standing, Kagar sneered. Your outer shell is surprisingly sturdy, isn't it? He swung a third time, but the blade only grazed thin air. Kagar's eyes widened in sheer disbelief at the boy's speed. Quickly recovering his composure, he let out a derisive scoff. However, my blade is forged from pure diamond. With a blur of motion, Kagar struck again, his speed reaching levels that defied the human eye. Jang's head tumbled to the ground. Kagar stood over him, cold and indifferent. What a waste. If this beast wiped them out, our hunters have truly become pathetic. Behind him, even though Jang's head was severed from his neck, the light in his eyes had not yet faded. Memories flooded back. He saw his father, a man consumed by work, always leaving his family behind to provide for them. Yet his father was a soul of pure kindness, whom Jang loved dearly. Every day, he and his mother would wait for his return. They believed their happiness would last forever, until a cruel accident stole his father away in an instant. Young Jang had watched, helpless, as his father died, to save him. After that tragedy, his mother's life began to spiral. Drowning in debt, his mother's once soft hands became calloused and broken. Watching her wither, little Jang asked, Mum, ... Exhausted and pale, she would only offer a weak, reassuring smile. I'm fine, my dear. Don't worry. But when the sun set, the truth emerged. Every night, Jang heard her muffled sobs echoing through the walls. Blaming himself for her pain, Jang decided he didn't deserve life. In despair, he turned a blade against his own skin. His mother walked in and gasped, dropping everything in her hands. She whispered in total horror. What have you done? Jang looked up, his voice hollow. Mum, ... I think I've awakened. Strange, dark growths erupted from his skin. Watching the heroic hunters on the screen, weeping uncontrollably. Mom, I'll become a hunter. One you can be proud of. They clung to each other, sobbing in the wreckage of their lives. They tried to fight the world, but reality is a cruel master. Their struggle only led to deeper misery and unforgiving hardship. Before they could taste victory, his mother fell into a permanent coma. Now, Jang had become the very monster the world feared. That's when Human approached him with a grim truth. The global balance of power had finally crumbled. Nations were being conquered one by one. And now, Korea's ultimate enemy stood revealed. She begged him to be their secret weapon and slay Japan's greatest hunter. Yet now, Jang lay decapitated by Kagura's blade. Snapping back to the present, Jang's eyes suddenly regained their focus. Though Kagar remained blissfully unaware. What a pointless waste of my time, Kagar muttered, turning away. His mind was already on his next goal. The invasion of Korea. But as the words left his lips, an anomaly erupted, causing Kag to scream in terror. What the hell is this? He watched as a massive surge of mana enveloped Jang's body. He cried out in disbelief, "He's regenerating." But I already took his head. While Kang was paralyzed by confusion, Jang lunged forward. Agony instantly surged through him, making Kang let out a blood-curdling scream. However, he quickly regained his composure, desperately swinging his blade downward. A crescent-shaped blade light erupted as powerful mana completely coated Kang's sword. He roared in a frenzy, "You bastard!" Suddenly, a mystical crest appeared beneath his feet, a crescent formation trapping both Kang and the fallen Jang. In a flash, Kang's figure vanished, leaving behind dozens of lethal afterimages flickering around the magic crest. Then, a barrage of slashes tore into Jang's body. Kang had unleashed his ultimate skill, Life Snatcher. Countless clones materialized around them, delivering 12 simultaneous strikes that shredded through Jang. Kang moved like a deadly dancer in the air, his blade light soaring as he charged straight toward the dungeon's exit. Outside the gate lay a peaceful mountain forest, but that tranquility was shattered by the shockwaves of Kang's swordlight. The strikes were devastating, packing enough power to level an entire mountain peak. Back inside the dungeon, Kang finally sheathed his sword. Limping away with a bleeding leg, he sighed and muttered, "I can't believe he almost took my foot off. I need to recover." Before he could finish, a sharp spike impaled his other leg. His face twisted in agony as cold sweat. Behind him, a pair of skeletal hands rose suddenly. Even with his body severed, Jang was still capable of launching an attack. This horrifying sight left Kang trembling in terror as he stammered, "You absolute monster." He desperately attacked Jang once more. Meanwhile, outside a dungeon gate in Japan, Ruto was waiting with a massive reinforcement squad. These were elite Hunter specialized reinforcements sent by the Ministry of Defense. A woman standing beside Ruto asked hesitantly, "Prime Minister?" Ruto replied, in a low voice, "It has been 3 days since he entered. We must investigate what happened. He is not just the defense minister, but Japan's #1 hunter." Suddenly, a severed head came flying out from the gate. In that moment, another pair of legs stepped out. It was Jang, returned in his terrifying monster form. Ruto was struck with horror, but before he could even utter a word, something sliced clean through his neck. The attacker was none other than Jang. Meanwhile, at the Korean Hunter Association's penthouse, a worried woman asked Uman, "Do you think he can really do it?" In Japan, before she could finish, Yuman cut her off with a cold stare. "We shall see if he can truly defeat Japan's strongest hunter and their prime minister." Back at the dungeon, Prime Minister Ruto remained unharmed, pinning Jang's head down with just one hand. He immediately unleashed a flurry of devastating punches. Under the weight of that overwhelming power, boom, a surge of mana shattered the surrounding ground. Jang's eyes went dull as he lost all focus. Ruto's strength is unrivaled. Not only is he the Prime Minister, but he is also Japan's rank 0. An SSS-class hunter you must never provoke. Don't ask why the sea is salty. Jang was the perfect example, falling after just one punch. 3 years ago, most gates were cleared, and the world's fear shifted from monsters to the terrifying power of hunters. Several nations attempted to eliminate them, but every single effort ended in total failure. Their abilities were simply beyond human comprehension. Hunters worldwide realized they could either coexist peacefully or seize control by force. Power was theirs for the taking, and Japan became the prime target. The reason was simple. Their very own Prime Minister was a legendary SSS-class hunter. Ruto was brutal, even before awakening. Once the hunter system emerged, he immediately schemed to take over South Korea. However, his ambition was thwarted by a true monster. After being crushed by Ruto, Jang's body rapidly regenerated back to its human form. Witnessing this, the Defense Ministry hunters cried out in shock, but they quickly rallied, shouting, "Prime Minister, leave this to us." As they charged forward together, one arrogant fool led the charge, lunging toward Jang with a cocky smirk. "A monster that can regenerate. Let's see you survive without a head." He swung his axe, but Jang was far faster. Before the axe could even land, the hunter's head was already flying off his shoulders. He didn't even realize he was dead, as blood sprayed everywhere. The pungent scent of iron filling the air. The Prime Minister's group recoiled in pure horror at the gruesome bloodbath unfolding before them. Jang's ruthlessness was absolute, yet the arrogant hunters behind him still grumbled. How dare that bastard lay a hand on one of our own? As they surged forward, Ruto's voice cut through like ice. Take one more step, and I'll slaughter you all myself. The hunters froze and retreated in unison, while Jang remained eerily composed amidst the mounting chaos. Ruto's gaze remained locked on the boy, his eyes burning with an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. It began years ago, on a day when Japan was buried under a relentless, suffocating blanket of white snow. A small boy sat huddled in a corner, nearly buried alive. A man approached, asking, "Hey kid." That man was a young Ruto, and the boy was Keiga. Ruto didn't answer with words, only a gentle smile as he sat down beside the lonely, shivering child. Wrapping his heavy cloak around the boy, Ruto offered him a new life. On that day, a discarded soul found salvation. As they walked through the storm, Ruto finally asked, "Tell me." The young boy hesitated, his voice trembling with uncertainty before finally whispering his name. "It's Keiga." Now, seeing that same boy reduced to a severed head, he channeled every ounce of fury into a devastating strike. Jang had no time to react. The impact sent him hurtling back, but Ruto didn't stop. He lunged again, his fists raining down like meteors. A massive hole was blasted through Jang's chest. His skull shattered, and an eye was torn away by the strike. Seeking total annihilation, Ruto summoned a torrent of mana flames to incinerate whatever remained of Jang's body. When the inferno finally subsided, nothing was left on the scorched earth but ash and absolute silence. The hunters behind him stood in awe, quickly whispering in admiration, "That is the power of our leader." Ruto stared at the ashes with lingering hatred, but his expression soft as he looked at Kaguya's head. Suddenly, shimmering threads of mana appeared from the void, weaving themselves around the scorched remains on the ground. In a mere heartbeat, the skeleton reconstructed into a perfect body. Seeing this, Ruto's face twisted in pure shock. Memories flooded back to a day when Ruto and Keiga were clearing a battlefield. Only then did they find peace. Turning away, Ruto spoke with a voice full of regret. Keiga simply shook his head and smiled, signaling that he held no resentment toward his mentor. Ruto continued solemnly, "Japan is safe, but we must target Korea and China next. You might lose your life. If you are afraid, tell me now." Keiga looked at his bleeding arm, his gaze hardening with unwavering resolve. "You saved me from the streets. My life has belonged to you since the day we met in the snow." He paused, then stepped toward Ruto. After a long silence, Keiga asked, "Can I ask for one thing after this? Would it be alright if I called you father?" Ruto let out a long, heavy sigh. The sudden stiffness in the air made Keiga panic as shadows deepened. But then Ruto spoke softly. "You have been my son since the very beginning." Keiga stood stunned as the morning sun began to rise, mirroring the light finally shining within his lonely soul. That beautiful moment of light was everything to him, but today, that precious bond had been shattered forever. Fueled by the memory of his lost son, Ruto's power exploded, causing the very earth to bleed molten lava. Terrified by the heat, the woman behind him instantly activated her ice skills to shield herself from the burn. She watched Ruto with dread, realizing he had succumbed to a blind, murderous rage aimed solely at A volcanic eruption shook the area as lava cascaded like a waterfall, completely enveloping Ruto in a suit of fire. He raised his hand, his voice cold and lethal. "Every cell of your being will melt into nothingness." As he finished his sentence, a tide of white-hot lava surged forward, hungry to consume the young man. The wave of fire grew larger, clearly intending to erase Daejang from existence once and for all. The lava began to erode Daejang's flesh, but with a desperate burst of speed. He leaped into the air. Daejang swung his claws for a catch, but another pillar of molten rock erupted from the ground beneath. His upper body was engulfed in flames once more. The hunters watching from a distance trembled in absolute terror. The entire city glowed under the volcanic surge, turning the sky a deep, as if painted in blood. Moments later, the volcanic haze began to clear. Ruto stood tall and defiant, overlooking a massive crater of bubbling magma at his feet. Trapped within the inferno, Jiang struggled desperately to break free, but his efforts seemed utterly futile. Suddenly, Ruto barked out a command, and a girl named Haim appeared instantly at his side. "Freeze that pit for eternity," he ordered coldly. Obeying immediately, Haim began channeling her powerful frost abilities. Without a second of hesitation, she unleashed her power, sending a torrent of jagged ice surging downward. The lava pit was rapidly consumed by the encroaching frost. Trapped between fire and ice, Jang fought a desperate battle for survival. He fought to claw his way out of the molten depths, but every movement felt useless. Meanwhile, in Korea, at the Kang Jang Guild headquarters, a healer worked tirelessly in the lab to save a man named Tu. Somehow, he was still alive. Faint threads of mana remained in his body. Back in Japan, the sky remained stained a hellish red. At the dungeon gate, Ruto gave a stern command, ordering a select few to stay while the others retreated. The hunters bowed in obedience. But just then, a scorched hand slowly emerged from the depths of the lava pit. It smashed through the thick layer of ice. This molten heat was nothing compared to what he endured in the Blood Gate, having survived this 10,000 times before. Jang rose again as his body began to regenerate in an instant. He strode boldly through the searing magma, as if he was simply walking through lukewarm water. The agony was immense, yet Jang endured it with gritted teeth. Even this intense heat couldn't completely incinerate his form. Moments later, his body was nearly whole again. Breaking free from the molten flow, Jang lunged forward with explosive speed. Ignoring the burning heat, he suppressed his pain and launched a ferocious assault toward the edge of the pit. Hearing the commotion, Haim spun around, her eyes wide with sudden terror. As Jiang escaped the pit, Ruto sensed the shift in power and ordered Haim to lead the hunters to safety. Her expression darkened at the command. She glanced back at Jang's terrifying visage and remained silent. Meanwhile, Ruto charged forward to intercept the monster before him. Watching from a distance, Haim felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. Clenching her fists against her chest, she whispered to herself that Ruto looked as if he were offering a final prayer. Flashing back to earlier, Haim had entered the Prime Minister's room to find Ruto tending to his own wounds. "Aren't you pushing too hard?" she asked hesitantly. "Even a monster's regeneration has limits." Ruto responded only with a heavy silence. After a long pause, he muttered grimly, "Among the four great hunter nations, America, China, Russia, and Japan, we are the weakest." He believed that if they failed to conquer Korea, Japan would have no way to survive. Haim tried to reason with him, worried about the hunters' lives. But Ruto's resolve remained unshakable. He was willing to fight until his body crumbled, determined to eliminate the threat that could destroy Japan's future. Transforming into lava once more, he roared, "I will protect my nation at any cost." With a thunderous punch to the ground, Ruto sent waves of magma surging toward Jang, forcing him back before charging in like a madman. A devastating blow landed with a boom. Jang took the hit, but quickly recovered. Failing to end it, Ruto clenched his fist tighter and launched another explosive strike. Brilliant flames began to dance before erupting toward his target. Jiang tried to dodge, but the molten wave swallowed him whole. Knowing his opponent's resilience, Ruto refused to stop his relentless assault. Magma-infused fists rained down in a frenzy, sending echoes of destruction booming across the mountain. At the base of the mountain, Haim delivered the Prime Minister's orders. "Everyone, we must retreat immediately. I will stay behind, so you all must." She trailed off, her expression filled with grim resolve. Suddenly, the hunters dropped to their knees in a show of loyalty. They shouted in unison, "The Prime Minister has done so much for us. We will protect him until the end." Meanwhile, the fierce battle raged on the summit. Ruto charged forward, cloaked in searing magma, until he suddenly erupted in a massive explosion. But then, Ruto's hands began to shake uncontrollably. He collapsed, powerless, amidst the cooling lava. From above, Haim and her followers watched the battlefield in somber silence. Just as victory seemed certain for Ruto, a dark silhouette rose from the magma and lunged toward him. The spectators watched in horror as the tide turned. In a shocking twist, Guyang emerged once more from the molten depths. His gaze turned purely malevolent, and under the terrified eyes of the crowd, he lunged straight toward the top. Seeing this, Han panicked and tried to use her ice magic. But Diang ignored the frost consuming him and dragged her down. Ruto lost his mind at the sight, and the hunters above scrambled to dive down for a desperate rescue mission. Haim was seized by Jang, her face pale with terror, but he showed no mercy as he dragged her toward Ruto. Without warning, Ruto abandoned his lava form, Jang's iron grip. Despite losing his hostage, Jang didn't seem the least bit shaken by the turn of events. Seizing the opening, he swung his blade downward, severing Ruto's head from his neck and leaving the charging hunters paralyzed in shock. Seeing the chaos, Diang began the eerie process of regenerating his mangled body once again. As the ice layer slowly the hunters finally regained their senses and launched a coordinated group attack against him. Under their relentless fury, Jang was shredded before he could fully reform, sending a piece of his head flying through the air. The hunters rushed to Han's side, frantically asking. But Ham was drowning in despair, unable to believe her eyes. Lifeless corpse. His decapitated head lay there, completely encased in ice, while the hunters struggled to find words to comfort their fallen leader. Before another word could be uttered, an ominous sound echoed from the shadows behind them, forcing them to turn around to see mana threads weaving through the air until Jang was fully restored to normal. At that sight, Han's tears burst forth again. For Diang now looked like a vengeful demon crawling out of hell. She closed her eyes in pure hopelessness, tears flowing until the blurry silhouette of Ruto suddenly appeared before her again. Ruto lay beside her with a gentle smile, asking if she was awake. Thinking the nightmare was over, she sobbed in his arms. Still trembling, she tried to explain to him, "I just had the most horrific nightmare." Ruto whispered comfort, promising his protection. The man in her arms suddenly turned into solid ice. It was nothing more than a cruel hallucination Han experienced just moments before Jang's final, devastating strike. In a flash, Jang decimated the Japanese hunters. Unaware that Han was showing signs of movement behind his back, she silently activated her skill to turn her arm into ice, encasing her entire body in frost. She crawled toward Ruto's severed head. They both sank into the burning depths of the molten lava. Jang, however, remained indifferent to the tragedy, turning his back to walk calmly toward the dungeon's exit gate. Meanwhile, at the Jeomkong Guild headquarters in Korea, Taisu regained consciousness and headed straight for the Mana Stone storage. Yagu, the vice leader, followed him anxiously. "You cannot continue to push your body like this. You are our only remaining source of mana." Taisu coldly cut her off before she could even finish. "I already know they have almost no mana left. Then why?" Biting his lip, Taisu growled that the pathetic coward he used to bully had escaped the blood gate to kill him. Recalling Jang's face, his rage boiled over as he gnashed his teeth and cursed that damn brat. With a sudden move, he cast aside his outer coat, revealing a sight that left Yeju completely breathless with shock. You've actually..." She stammered, but Taesu silenced her with a sharp, icy glare. Indeed, strange runes appeared on his back. He had become an S-rank hunter after finally shattering his inner seal. At that moment, a tidal wave of immense mana erupted from the Jeomkong headquarters, nearly knocking Yagi off her feet. Standing in the eye of the storm, she gasped for air as Taesu commanded the immediate mobilization of the entire guild. A few hours later, every member of the Jeomkong guild stood assembled in the Grand Hall, awaiting their orders. A representative bowed to Taesu, reporting their readiness, though many members were still whispering rumors in the back. I thought he was dead. It seems the vice leader somehow managed to bring him back to life. Ignoring the growing commotion and the chatter of the crowd, tactical manager Han Kyung-chan reported the monster's movement toward the gate, but Taesu interrupted to demand the bastard's head. Kyung-chan responded with a roar of approval. Truly our master. The tactical team of Jeomkong swears on our lives to support your vengeance. Until the end. But before he could finish, Taesu brutally decapitated him, leaving the guild members paralyzed by the sudden bloodbath. Holding the severed head, Taesu coldly reminded them that this man was once the vice chairman of the Hunters Association, since absorbing the associations 3 years ago. The Kang Guild has reigned supreme over Korea, fueled by Taesu's terrifying S-rank telekinesis. With a cold command, Taesu raised his hand, and the moment he swung it down with lethal intent, another head was severed from its shoulders. Crimson blood sprayed instantly, staining the faces of the terrified hunters standing behind him. Yo turned away, unable to bear the gruesome sight. She had previously asked him, with concern, if unsealing his true power was truly necessary. Taesu's abilities were born from a dark curse, yet he believed that such a twisted nature made them perfect. Even now, he felt no regret for releasing his sealed mana. As he continued his slaughter, he asked coldly, "Do you all intend to support me with everything you have?" No one dared to answer. Every witness stood frozen, rendered speechless by the sheer brutality of Taesu's actions. In a mere heartbeat, all 1,528 members of the Jeomkong Guild present that day were annihilated by Taesu on the spot. The guild's grand hall was transformed into a macabre graveyard, with corpses piled like mountains, and blood painting the floor a deep scarlet. Taesu proceeded to harvest the mana from all 1,500 victims. Yo could only stand by, watching the horror unfold in silence. Once the carnage ended, she asked softly if he was all right. Standing atop the pile of bodies, Taesu replied, "Icily no. That bastard killed the triple S-rank prime minister. Even after consuming the life force of every person here, his thirst for power remained unquenched." Haunted by the thought of Jang transforming into a monster, Taesu swore an oath to eliminate him at any cost. Narrowing his eyes, he declared his intent to take flight. Meanwhile, at the dungeon's threshold, Yumin waited anxiously for Jang's inevitable return. Soon enough, he emerged from the glowing portal. Without a moment's delay, Omen began the arduous process of spiritual recovery. Her elite S-rank healing magic functioned by mending damaged cells, fueled entirely by the depths of her own mana reserves. Though Yumin warned it would take time, she promised to save Jang's mother. Hearing this, Jang stepped outside, to wait in quiet contemplation. Hours later, Yumin emerged, trembling with exhaustion, as she whispered that his mother would awaken within a week if treatment continued daily. The words had barely left her lips before she collapsed. Those nearby rushed to her side, shouting in alarm as her strength failed. Chairman Jang stood in grim silence for a long moment. Such a staggering price in mana. He wondered why she would push herself to the brink. Crawling toward him, Yumin took his hand and pleaded sincerely for him to remain alive. As she spoke, she pressed Jang's hand against her chest. In that instant, a blinding flash of light erupted between them. Sensing the surge of energy, Jang reflexively pulled his hand back in surprise. Undeterred, Yumin calmly explained that his bezification was progressing even outside the blood. Gaiching stood stunned, but she continued her grim explanation. Ever since the first gate appeared 50 years ago, all subsequent portals have slowly mutated into these terrifying blood gates. Since Dai Yi's escape, the world has faced a rapid transformation, causing every gate across the globe to turn into a crimson nightmare. The mana circulating within those gates is actively fueling his inner strength. Yumin's expression grew heavy with dread. After a long pause, she explained that while normal gates are mere pits, blood gates are actual pathways. They connect to a distant realm, and something malevolent is using them as a bridge. Something that is actively searching for Jang. Elsewhere, the stability of the world fractured as the gates began to burst open. Legions of monsters poured out in a ceaseless tide. They launched a brutal assault on the city. Ordinary citizens stood no chance against the onslaught and could only flee in sheer terror. Piercing screams echoed through the streets as the number of monsters emerging from the gates grew exponentially. Simultaneously, at the South Korean government headquarters, a powerful protective barrier was being erected to hold back the chaos. The president demanded answers, shouting about why the Kang Guild had failed to respond to their urgent calls. An official hesitated before delivering the grim news. The entire guild had been wiped out. The president recoiled, shouting in utter disbelief. How could this happen? The official shook his head, unsure of the cause, and asked if they should request immediate international intervention. The president refused, fearing it would lead to their ruin, and ordered the immediate declaration of martial law instead. The official began to protest that the military would be useless against such threats. But the president cut him off with cold authority. What other choice do we have? The Kang Guild was not our only line of defense. Korea still possesses other powerful groups, such as the Dua Guild, which currently holds the number 2 rank. They have A-rank elites, like John Yu, along with the 3rd-ranked Vinin Guild and the 4th-ranked Yang Hack Association. As the nation plunged into peril, these hunters did indeed. However, the sheer volume of monsters proved overwhelming, and the hunters were systematically defeated. Watching from above, Jang wondered if this was all his fault. Yumin didn't offer comfort. Instead, she pointedly asked him what his next move would be. Below in the city, a terrified woman tripped while trying to escape. As a monster lunged for the kill, Jang appeared, slaying the beast in a single strike. He bit his lip fiercely as the past haunted him, his expression twisting with sudden rage. When Jang died in the Bloodgate, the mana tried to turn him into a monster. He barely endured that agony and gained a strange new power. Or at least, that is what Jang believed, but the truth was far more sinister. This mana wouldn't let him die until his transformation into a beast was complete. Thinking of it made Jang's face warp with fury. He thought peace was finally within reach now that his mother was being treated. But reality struck back with a cruel blow, and it was all because of these wretched monsters. Jang unleashed his fury on the beasts, tearing them apart with a desperate scream. "Why won't you leave me alone?" Elsewhere, someone watched him through the Bloodgate. Amidst the damp air and writhing tentacles, a gaunt figure slowly emerged from the shadows. He sat upon a throne of books carried by a giant spider, his voice heavy and ominous. "Is it him? The one who created the rift?" Minutes earlier, Jang told Yumin, "I'll handle the monsters. Just keep my mother safe." Yumin nodded softly in response. "I understand. I'll treat her at the association's shelter, so fight with everything you've got." Back to now, Jang fought alone as the other hunters had fallen. These creatures looked familiar. They were the same breed he'd battled in the Bloodgate for 5 long years. Monster numbers are limited, as all gate activity eventually stops after a certain time. Jang cleared every monster in the area. If this continued, he could finally live a happy life. Suddenly, a projectile pierced Jang's head, and blood sprayed instantly as he collapsed. Jang turned back to find a unit from the military approaching his position. Someone hesitated, noting he only killed monsters and harmed no one. But the commander ruthlessly ignored reason and gave the order. "It doesn't matter. He caused this tragedy. Bind him at once and wait for the hunter reinforcements to arrive." Jang frowned at the words as a line of armored vehicles opened fire directly at him. Smoke and flames instantly filled the air. Caught off guard, Jang was engulfed by the massive explosion of artillery shells. The pain was unbearable. He wanted to scream for them to stop, but the vehicles kept firing relentlessly. Jang was forced back toward the blood gate, his body covered in countless wounds of all sizes. Human had warned him to be careful. Once the gate opens, resisting the monster transformation is nearly impossible. But at this moment, Jang stopped caring. He slaughtered every soldier who had dared to point a gun at him. Suddenly, he saw something in the distance. It triggered a heart-wrenching memory from his past. He remembered when he was still human, being beaten nearly to death by Tae-soo's gang. While his classmates ignored the bullying, one blonde friend watched with frustration, unable to intervene. Every time Jang was attacked, that friend would curse at the thugs, looking for any chance to stop them. "Damn Hun Tae-soo, why only you?" Jang replied coldly, "Because I'm easy, prey. Just pretend you don't know me so you won't get hurt." This angered his friend, who grabbed Jang's shirt in protest. "Hey, Kang Jang, are you crazy?" Jang didn't answer, simply avoiding his friend's gaze. Seeing no other choice, the boy let go and muttered in frustration, "Forget it, damn it." That was how his childhood friend seemingly left him, or, in truth, that friend never stopped gathering evidence. It was proven by the state of his right eye. After collecting proof, he sent it to the police and educational boards. But the very next day, Jang's friend was brutally beaten and hospitalized. He was found having lost his right eye entirely. When Jang arrived, he could only sit by the bed and weep. His friend sighed and spoke softly, "I'm sorry, Kang Jang. I don't think I can go to school with you anymore." Jang trembled with rage, hissing through grit teeth. "Hun Tae-soo? That bastard did this? I'll definitely..." But his friend stopped him before he could finish. "Don't do it, please." Jang sobbed uncontrollably and asked, "You lost your powers. What are you going to do now?" Despite his condition, his friend smiled optimistically. "Don't worry, it's fine. I'll just join the military instead." Now, Jang stared at that familiar face, but his body shook violently as he clutched his friend's head and howled in agony. At that same moment, the horde of monsters launched another attack on him. Jang's eyes turned murderous. These monsters were the cause of everything. He channeled his fury into a brutal, endless slaughter. De-young was like a moth to a flame, plunging into the monster horde with a bloodthirsty madness. Meanwhile, high within the government's walls, live feeds of Jang, amidst the chaos, flashed onto the screens. Standing beside the president, an aide trembled. "Mr. President, what on earth is that thing?" "That," the president replied grimly, "is the monster that slaughtered the Kong chairman and the former Japanese prime minister. It is the source of this nightmare. The order is final. It must be eliminated to stabilize the gates." Yet, even he could not fathom why Jang was suddenly hunting his own kind. His aide could only offer a confused, silent shake of his head. "We have no answers. Worse, other invincible monsters have emerged. We are out of time." The president's brow furrowed in deep concern. "What about our local hunters? They have... They have all been wiped out." The news hit the president like a physical blow. After a long, heavy silence, he made his choice. Contact the International Hunter Bureau. Across the globe, the SOS was instantly broadcast. Clinging to a long staff, a man spoke with chilling indifference. "So, this is the beast that slaughtered the elites of Korea and Japan. Is the Bloodgate behind this?" Things are finally getting interesting. He slammed his staff down, releasing a tidal wave of raw mana. This was the pride of China SSS rank hunter, Ling Wang. Elsewhere, a woman stared at the footage of Jang. Her teeth gritted in fury. This is pure madness. She was the ultimate power of the Russian Federation, the Tripolice rank hunter Vladimir Ruzana. In America, a man in priestly robes let out a heavy sigh. I hear the cries of the suffering. My path is clear. I must depart. What? His attendant gasped in shock. If you leave, the Russian conflict will. But he was silenced by a cold. The war is already over, the man declared. Suddenly, massive wings unfurled from his back, launching him into the heavens. The attendant's face paled instantly. He knew better than to argue. Once this man set his mind, not even fate itself could stop him. This was Stephen Lucas, America's strongest tripolist. Meanwhile, amidst the slaughter, Jang's mind drifted back to the past. For 5 brutal years, he had been trapped, fighting endlessly within the Bloodgate. It was a living hell, no food, no water, and not a moment's sleep. Survival was his only instinct. There were moments. Young nearly broke, his sanity slipping as a dark transformation clawed to consume his body. But 2 faces kept him anchored. His mother, clinging to life in the ice, and the monster responsible who was still walking free. Pure spite fueled him. He weaponized his hatred, using it as a shield to keep the corruption from taking hold. Yet now, that burning rage was flickering. Had his thirst for vengeance finally been quenched? No, he shook the thought away. The Bloodgate's mana was surging, becoming an uncontrollable storm within him. It had driven him to slaughter the innocent, even his own childhood friend. To atone, Jang vowed to stay away from humanity and hunt the beasts instead. With every monster he felled, a single question haunted him. Could he ever truly wash the blood from his hands? Suddenly, a searing beam of light tore through the air, causing Jang's very flesh to begin to liquefy. From the perspective of his severed eye lying in the dirt, he glimpsed a figure approaching from afar. The stranger possessed massive wings and seemed to lock eyes with the organ on the ground. It was just like that Christmas years ago when the gates first opened. Deep within a cathedral, a priest stood before his flock, offering prayers of gratitude on that fateful Christmas day. But before the final amen, the sky fractured. Countless gates tore open, with not a single hunter in sight to defend them. Blood-curdling screams echoed through the holy halls. Run, get to the main exit. The priest bellowed, ushering his people to safety. But he himself refused to budge, standing tall against the impending doom. Suddenly, a divine, blinding radiance erupted. As the light dimmed, majestic white wings unfurled. That celestial burst had obliterated every monster within the sanctuary. On that night of blood and Harley, a legendary power had been awakened. An awakening occurred in America's largest cathedral before a crowd of 100,000. Miraculously, 0 lives were lost, with only 138 sustaining minor injuries. Despite the overwhelming monster horde, the priest's divine protection kept every single soul safe. He became the world's very first Tripolice rank hunter, a living messiah who became America's greatest hero. Since he was a child, Jang had worshipped him. That hero was none other than Stephen Lucas. But why was he here, in this country? Before Jang could even process the shock, Lucas launched his next devastating assault. I was crushed by Lucas's devastating blow. He sighed, realizing the grim truth. I see, he muttered. This beast won't die easily. Within moments, Jang's body had completely regenerated. It was then he realized the terrifying reality Lucas had come specifically for his life. The assault was relentless. Every time Jang's flesh knitted back together, Lucas's blinding celestial light struck again with lethal precision. Despite his desperate attempts to endure the onslaught, the sheer force of the impact sent him crashing back dozens of meters. A sudden realization struck Jang. Lucas was an awakened who could communicate through mana, bypassing the need for any human translator. Before the next strike could fall, Jang screamed with all his might. Lucas froze, his eyes narrowing. Are you... human? Jang nodded weakly, pleading for a moment to speak. Under a sky-stained blood red, the tragic story of his life finally began to unfold. After listening to the harrowing tale, Lucas nodded slowly. The weight of Jang's suffering finally became clear to the legendary hunter. Suddenly, Lucas pulled the boy into a compassionate embrace. "You must have suffered so much," he whispered. "Tell me, what is your name?" Startled Jang managed to whisper his name. Lucas repeated it softly before asking, "Do you know that I fight only to save people?" Before Jang could even respond, Lucas's voice turned cold and hollow. "And yet, today, I have taken so many innocent lives, to ensure their souls were never forgotten." He had carved the name of every single victim directly into his own flesh, as an act of eternal atonement. Lucas bared his body, revealing thousands of names etched from his neck. Jang could only stare in absolute, horrified silence. Lucas spoke with a haunting calmness. "Kang Jang, I have the power to help you. I could slaughter every monster on this planet. But," he continued grimly, "in the time it would take, this calamity would consume the entire world, and millions more would perish." Lucas pointed to his own neck and slowly began carving a new name into his skin. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I am truly, deeply sorry." Jang's pupils constricted in pure terror as he saw the fresh wounds. The name Lucas was currently etching into his flesh was his own. Before he could react, a blinding light erupted. Lucas's hand gripped Jang's head, and the boy's skull began to warp and distort. Under the pressure, with a voice full of tragic finality, Lucas made his move. "For the sake of the world, I must kill you now." Meanwhile, at the Hunter Association, Uman desperately treated Jang's mother while monitoring the battle. Her secretary watched from the shadows, face pale with anxiety. Having pushed her healing abilities far beyond their limit, blood began to seep uncontrollably from Yumin's eyes and nose. Elsewhere, far across the ocean, Rosanna erupted in a fit of absolute rage. "That bastard Lucas. He abandoned the front lines just to run to Korea." Gritting her teeth, she hissed with venomous intensity. "Has he been hiding his true strength from us this entire time?" Suddenly, a frantic report crackled through the screen. 80% of our forces are annihilated. We cannot hold the front line anymore. "Ma'am, the American hunters will—" Rosanna cut him off with a roar. "If only we had captured that monster sooner." At that exact moment, the heavy atmosphere in the room shifted. Two figures strode boldly into the massive echoing palace. It was none other than Tae-Soo and Yi. Tae-Soo smirked at the furious Rosanna. "That monster. I'll capture it for you." He was referring to the first triple S-rank beast appearing in the north. When that creature first emerged, the world was paralyzed by a fear so deep that no one dared to even move against it, despite Russia's desperate attempts to hold their ground. Their entire northern military stronghold was reduced to smoldering ash and rubble. The Russian government, completely ignorant of the gates, only to suffer a crushing and absolute defeat. In a final act of desperation, they launched half of their nuclear arsenal. Yet, amidst the radioactive fire, the monster remained completely unharmed. Due to a lack of mono-based weaponry and the resulting fallout, northern Russia transformed into a desolate wasteland ruled by mutated horrors. To save their collapsing economy, they declared war on the United States. Now, Tae-Soo was arrogantly offering to slay the beast alone. Rosanna scoffed as if she had heard a ridiculous joke. A mere S-rank hunter from South Korea. The claim was utterly preposterous to her. Rosanna fixed a cold, murderous glare on Tae-Soo. "Who gave a low-life like you permission to enter my presence?" she demanded. "You boast that an S-rank can defeat the beast of the north? Tell me, boy, do you have a death wish?" Her killing intent exploded, unleashing a crushing pressure that caused the very foundations of the Grand Palace to crack and groan. Both Tae-Soo and Yezu were forced to their knees. Tae-Soo gasped through the pain. "You are only here because of that monster. I heard you suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of the United States." Rosanna's face contorted with rage. "You little bastard." Tae-Soo remained unshaken. "I can destroy it." Rosanna sneered. A weakling like you wouldn't survive a minute in that lethal radiation. With a flick of her hand, she projected a horrifying image of the Earth's surface, completely choked by thick, radioactive clouds. Tae-soo simply nodded, his expression hauntingly calm. Rosanna's brow furrowed in confusion. Are you planning to use a shield? Don't be stupid. That level of contamination would melt any shield in seconds. It is nothing short of a suicide mission. But before she could finish her sentence, Rosanna's pupils shrank. Her face was suddenly overcome with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Strands of mana suddenly swirled around Tae-soo, encasing her completely. Trembling with fear, she stammered. What kind of monster are you? Rosanna quickly regained her composure, biting her lip as she muttered. Slay the northern monster, and 30% is yours. Actually, make it half of the mana stones from that beast. Whatever, Tae-soo replied, appearing completely indifferent to the offer. With that, he rose to leave. Over his shoulder, he threw back one last sentence. I will crush it and return soon. Elsewhere in Korea, Jang was being crushed by the relentless, blinding light of Lucas's divine power. Yet Lucas stood there, his voice heavy with a profound sense of guilt. I am truly sorry, but I must end your life. In an instant, Dai Jang's body was pulverized by that radiance. Amidst the blinding light of the 10 directions. Eventually, the light dissipated into tiny sparks. Floating within the debris, a single eye was sent flying into a distant shadow. It landed in a hidden corner behind a nearby wall. Through that, Jang was able to fully reconstruct his broken body. But he couldn't bring himself to face Lucas. He was lost, unsure of what his next move should even be. Before he could strategize, Lucas appeared again. This time, he didn't attack. Instead, he embraced Jang, whispering with desperate, sincere urgency. Forgive me. Strike me back if it will ease your pain. However, the light radiating from him caused Jang agonizing pain. Lucas wouldn't let go, clutching the boy tightly while continuing to murmur apologies. As if that would help, Jang's body melted away once more, leaving nothing behind but a solitary eye. Lucas spoke softly. Your ability to regenerate has its limits. It is not infinite. Jang's body reformed instantly. Lucas embraced him again, whispering, Forgive me. I will keep killing you until it no longer hurts. Dai Jang wanted to scream every curse word he knew. His ability was bone armor, allowing him to encase his body, but it came with excruciating, soul-crushing agony. Now, Lucas forced him into a horrific loop of death and rebirth. This hellish cycle inflicted unimaginable suffering upon him. Every second was pure torture. Yet Jang endured, fueled by his vengeance against Tae-soo and the dream of happiness with his mother. However, the shock of repeatedly dying at Lucas's hands was overwhelming. Even as a mere eye, Jang transcended his previous agony. His instant regeneration triggered countless times, finally pushing him past his human limits. Back at the academy, during a break, Dijang was watching a video. Tae-soo approached him curiously, asking, Hey, what are you watching? Startled, he replied, It's a video of Lucas. He's a hunter I truly admire. The screen showed Lucas saving lives. Tae-soo nodded in understanding. Ah, I see. His special ability is definitely Haha, by the way, what's your power? Me, I can manifest bone armor. Dai Jang answered honestly, showing his wrist where bone spikes emerged. Suddenly, Tae-soo threw a brutal punch directly into his face. He snorted in disgust. That's revolting. That moment became the root of all the misery Dai Jang. He couldn't understand why he had to suffer like this. What exactly had he done wrong? Why was he bullied by Tae-soo's gang? Why did they beat him near death, while everyone just ignored his cries? They threw him into the blood gates for 5 agonizing years. Yet that bastard Tae-soo felt no guilt, even after Jang became a monster. Every traumatic memory replayed in Jang's head like a broken film. A constant reminder of the hell he had survived. The agony of being tortured while transforming into a beast, being trapped in molten lava, dying countless times, and even the trauma of ending his childhood friend's life with his own hands. It reminded him of the cruel reality of this decayed society. He couldn't accept it. What was his sin? Yet, a lingering fragment of his humanity whispered to him, telling him it was okay to finally stop. Lucas was right. If he lived, many innocents would die. If his death meant his mother could live on. But at that moment, Jang completely snapped. He let out a low, guttural laugh. Suddenly, thousands of mana threads erupted from Jang's eyes, surging outward to link with every blood gate within the city. Lucas failed to sense the looming danger. Even if he had, there was no stopping Jang's final descent into monstrosity. At that moment, the entirety of South Korea was swallowed by a terrifying wave of dark mana. Where the two battled, fresh blood dripped onto the ground. Blood that was spilling from Lucas himself. Simultaneously, drones with cameras appeared in the sky. Amidst the crowd, a young priest prayed in silence. Back in Korea, the Hunter Association headquarters had been completely leveled. Deep in the bunker, Yuman desperately heals Mother Jang. Seeing the danger, her secretary tries to stop her. "President, you're overexerting yourself." But Yuman ignores the warning, pouring mana into Mother Jang. Her blood-stained face looks hauntingly grotesque. Suddenly, Amian collapses from exhaustion. Her secretary rushes over, screaming, "President, are you all right?" Trembling on the floor, Yuman whispers under her breath, "The healing. It's done." Sure enough, Mother Jang's pale complexion turns healthy. Moments later, she slowly opens her eyes. She has finally returned. Meanwhile, in Russia, Tae-soo heads north. He mutters to himself, "Jang, that bastard. Is he really fighting Lucas right now?" Recalling Jang's terrifying growth, he can't help but let out a frustrated curse. Damn it, but Jang isn't his main problem. A horrific monster looms before him. He grits his teeth, muttering, "This is insane." Back in Korea, the city has been reduced to a wasteland of smoldering ruins. Fueled by mana from the Bloodgate, Jang reverts to his monstrous form. Lucas is wounded, yet he stands. He wipes the blood from his brow, sighing heavily. This mana, ... it truly is a troublesome thing. Then, he steps forward and embraces Jang tightly. "Just how much pain have you been enduring?" he asks sincerely. As always, a divine light erupts from Lucas, searing Jang's flesh. Yet this time, Jang's body refuses to melt away. Jang raises a hand to strike. His razor-sharp claws flash through the air in an instant. Blood sprays everywhere, yet Lucas keeps speaking. Sometimes, just having someone to truly listen can save a person's soul. These words make Jang freeze mid-motion. Ignoring the danger, Lucas continues, "Therefore, I shall be the ears." There it all. With a sudden strike, he punches Jang across the face, his fist plunging directly into the monster's head. Lucas seems to be searching for something within, but he quickly leaps back to create distance. One of Lucas's arms has been severed a counter by Jang. Now, a piece of that arm remains lodged in Jang's skull. Just as Jang thinks he's safe, the severed arm suddenly detonates, causing his head to shatter into pieces. Witnessing the carnage, Lucas can't help but let out a weary sigh. Since gaining these powers, I hear them constantly. Jang collapses. He hears the wails of the suffering those enduring famine. Agonizing screams for salvation fill the air. High above, a drone records every single word Lucas utters. The entire world is listening to his sermon now. But fortunately, I also hear voices of hope and joy. The echoes of gratitude from those we've saved. He extends his arms, and in an instant, they transform into massive hands that reach out for Jang. Jang's eyes narrow in shock, but it's too late. He is crushed within those giant palms. Lucas continues to murmur, "Even now, I can hear the voices so clearly." He clenches his fist, and blood erupts instantly. Of Jang's massive body, only a single arm remains, ignoring the blood from his own severed limb. Soon, mana threads weave together, and Jang regenerates. Without a moment's hesitation, Lucas strikes again. He crushes the monster again, spilling flesh and blood. Yet Jang persists, his remaining eye filled with murderous rage. With a thunderous boom, Jang's claws strike the earth where Lucas stood. Jang glares at him before launching another savage assault. This time, Lucas blocks him effortlessly. He speaks softly. Is this truly the only path we can take? With his remaining hand, he traces the sign of the cross on Jang's chest. The monster freezes in shock. As if possessed, Jang begins to mutilate his own body. Blood spatters Lucas's face. Suddenly, visions of the thousands he has slain flash before his eyes. Jang flashes a ghastly smile as his features morph into Lucas. The two appear to be merging into one. Prayers flood Jang's subconscious, each word feeling like 1,000 needles piercing his brain. The agony is unbearable. When he finally opens his eyes, he's met with a surreal scene. He no longer understands his own actions. Another wave of pain makes him shudder. He should fear Lucas, yet he feels a strange, overwhelming warmth. Bloody, horrific memories flicker through his mind, but the visions shift. Scenes of terror are replaced by displays of profound respect and unwavering faith. It is the faith of those who believe in God. Endless crosses swirl in Jang's mind, making him curse in frustration. Lucas, that absolute bastard. He remains kneeling, as if offering a twisted funeral prayer for Jang. Meanwhile, across the ocean, his fanatical followers offer their silent, chilling prayers in unison. Halfway across the world, in northern Russia, Tae-soo is locked in a brutal struggle against a relentless, monstrous horde. He grits his teeth, cursing the creature's annoying level of power. Yet, even an Arctic beast is nothing compared to that wretched American. If he cannot take this thing down, he knows he stands no chance against that man. Determination blazes in Tae-soo's eyes. He will be the one to end Jang. Back in Korea, Jang lies broken in a pool of his own blood. But the blood gate pulses, flooding his shattered body with a surge of dark mana. In an instant, Jang raises a monstrous shadow of his former self. He lunges at Lucas with animalistic fury. Their clash is cataclysmic, causing nearby skyscrapers to groan and crumble until Jang is buried. Deep beneath the wreckage, out of the dust, a figure slowly appears. It is the one person Jang has yearned to see for many long years. Seeing the carnage before her, his mother trembles as she whispers a single word. Joy flashes in Jang's eyes, but it is quickly drowned by a flood of overwhelming tears. Mother ... he rasps, but in that heartbeat, her face drains of all color. She cannot believe her eyes. That one word fills her with pure terror, sparking memories of the day Jang first tried to hurt her. It was the day he awakened, when hideous bone spikes first tore through his skin. She was terrified then, but news of awakened hunters gave them hope. Back then, they held each other and wept together. Jang had promised her he would become a legendary hunter. But now, all she sees is a nightmare hideous monster. She turns and flees in horror, ignoring his desperate cries. Mother, it is me. It is your son, Jang. He reaches out to grab her wrist, but she collapses in a fit of pure, paralyzed panic. Is it because of this? He whimpers frantically. Is this why you were running, Mother? She looks back, her face twisted in utter revulsion. There is no maternal warmth. Left only cold. This is not me, Jang pleads, but she is beyond listening. In a fit of rage, she screams, "Get away!" She strikes him with a vicious slap, tearing the mangled flesh of his face until blood and gore spray the pavement. Just then, Lucas slowly approaches the tragic scene. He has watched it all and feels betrayed. Was your story about your mother nothing but a pathetic lie? He's consumed by righteous fury. But Jang stops holding back. With one lethal swipe, he decapitates him. From the severed head, a grotesque tentacle suddenly erupts. As Jang desperately tries to hold his mother, the entity strikes, forcing its way deep into his throat. The air turns cold, and the screaming stops. All that remains is Jang's bone-chilling, demonic laughter. His gaze has shifted. Something ancient and twisted has seized control of his physical form. It is a succubus, an entity that craves the strength of powerful men. She loathes the weak, having slaughtered countless men. She had been obsessed with Lucas's power, concocting a repulsive plan to merge their souls into one. Long ago, after her dark powers first awakened, she infiltrated Lucas's cathedral and possessed his body, mastering the art of spiritual fusion to claim her prey. She always gets what she wants. Now, she has a new host, Jang, a man far stronger than Lucas. It is the perfect prize. But as she dives into Jang's subconscious, she is pulled into the darkness of his memories. A memory surfaces. A young Jang wakes in the dead of night. He searches the house, only to find her slipping away into the night with her bags packed. "Mother, where are you going?" he asks. She does not answer. She simply starts to run. Jang chases her until his legs give out and he crashes onto the hard pavement. He watches her retreating back through tear-filled eyes. Perhaps a sliver of maternal love remained. Because she pauses to look back one last time. But then, she turns away and disappears into the dark. Under a cold, relentless rain, a broken child wanders home, whispering for a mother who will never return. But his cries met only silence. Only the oppressive darkness and the rhythmic drumming of rain answered him. Finally, breaking, Diang collapsed to his knees. His trembling silhouette. "Don't abandon me," he whispered through broken sobs. "I'm your son, Please, come back. Why did you leave me?" A haunting thought consumed him. Was it his fault? Did his father die because of him? Or was it because his powers were a curse? Was he truly nothing more than a filthy monster? Lost in his confusion, Young stumbled and fell, glass cutting deep into his palms. But in an instant, jagged, dark thorns erupted from the wounds. Staring at the horrific protrusions, Hang succumbed to a visceral agony. His cries of torment echoed through the desolate rain. He looked toward the heavens as tears streamed down his face, a silent sorrow witnessed by no one. Suddenly, a cold resolve took hold. Gritting his teeth, he snatched up a sharp shard of glass. Without a moment's hesitation, he began hacking away at the thorns, blood spraying like crimson rain. Then, a voice he had been longing for finally broke through the silence. "Dihang, Chung, Dihang." His mother had returned. Seeing her face, the boy's strength vanished, and he burst into tears once more. "Mum, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Terrified she would vanish again, he frantically sliced at the thorns growing from his skin. "They won't stop, Mum. They keep growing. What do I do? What should I do? Forgive me." Seeing her son's mangled state, Young's mother could only cover her mouth, her sobs echoing his own. She pulled him into a desperate embrace, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, my son. This is all my fault. Please, forgive me." As the rain subsided, a faint light returned, but how long would it last? Watching these memories, the witch let out a cold, mocking, "Ha ha ha. This guy is absolutely out of his mind. What a complete psycho." Believing she now owned him, the witch seized control of his body. She began to dance and leap like a maniac, her laughter ringing out across the clearing. But her triumph was short. Suddenly, a wave of paralyzing pain. Dang was fighting back. From deep within his consciousness, the witch felt a sensation of pure, unadulterated torment. It felt as if an exoskeleton was piercing her organs, while her muscles twisted and tore. Even worse, the body kept regenerating just to suffer again. The agony was beyond human comprehension. She eventually collapsed, trembling. He endures this every single second. Her expression shifted to one of profound, hopeless despair. Suddenly, a cold, guttural voice. "Get out of my body. You filthy bitch." Panic seized the witch, but after a brief, violent struggle, she was forcibly expelled from the boy's frame. Yang stood before her, eyes burning with murderous intent. She begged for mercy, but he didn't hesitate. Finally, he had reclaimed his body and his mind. But standing there, covered in blood and shadow, he looked like a vengeful demon, freshly crawled out from hell. Meanwhile, a strange phenomenon occurred near Lucas's body. A mysterious radiance erupted, enveloping both his severed head and his torso. Years ago, when the church fell to unknown monsters, eventually awakening his dormant powers, now, a flood of fragmented memories rushed back into his mind. He saw the echoes of agonizing screams, tragic lives, and the pervasive filth staining the world he swore to protect. Tears finally fell from Lucas's eyes as the blinding light reached its crescendo, wrapping him in a divine cocoon. Though the witch had previously seized his body, leaving him with only half control of his own actions, his heart had never wavered. His faith remained absolute until the heavens finally granted him the wings of an angel. Perhaps this was his true mission from God, and Lucas accepted it with a serene, humble joy. Under divine protection, even decapitation could not stop him. His body knit itself back together with miraculous speed. The sight left Yang speechless. A halo now glowed behind Lucas, while strange ethereal threads sprouted from his head. Yang could only stare in utter disbelief. Lost in his confusion, he was suddenly pulled into Lucas's embrace. "Get the hell away from me." But Lucas held firm, his holy presence causing the boy's decaying outer shell to flake away and dissolve. Why must a child endure such trials? The priest thought. Within moments, the monstrous transformation faded, and Jang became human again. Suddenly, the earth shattered. A massive, hideous tentacle erupted from below, threatening to swallow them both whole. But just then, two streaks of brilliant light descended from the heavens. They collided in the shape of a holy cross, obliterating the monster and reducing it to nothing but ash. Yang watched the spectacle in shock, but there was no time to rest. As he stood there, the sky was already swarming with colossal monsters. Lucas carried Jang as they soared through those mysterious, shimmering gates. They soon landed on a building left standing, before Lucas ascended again to stand amidst divine radiance. DY watched the scene in a daze. Suddenly, iron armor materialized as a majestic pair of wings. In a flash, Lucas was mounted upon a celestial steed. The brilliant light radiating from his form set a corner of the horizon ablaze. As the glare faded, a grand army appeared in the sky and began to slaughter the monster hordes. This legion looked like heaven's own warriors sent to save Earth. Meanwhile, Yang sat frozen, struggling with his humanity. At that very moment, a strange and powerful phenomenon began to sweep across the entire globe. A profound light of faith reached out to every single soul remaining on the planet. Whether they were believers or lowlifes like Tsu, the light granted them strength, just as Tsu was losing. He felt the surge of power instantly, his eyes widening in pure shock and disbelief. Yet for some, this light brought only agony. Lucas's son remembered a small hand gripping his father's coat. His young son had pleaded through desperate sobs. "Father, please do not go to pray today. I beg of you." Seeing the tears, Lucas hesitated. Every parent must eventually leave their child. When that time comes, you must learn to stand firm alone. Hearing those words, his son cried even harder, his face a mess of tears and sorrow. Now, Lucas stood in the sky, like a true archangel. "Kang Jang, a heavy destiny awaits you," he murmured. He warned that Jang would endure far more pain than this a cruel and terrifying reality. As Lucas spoke, His armor began to crumble. He seemed to know exactly which enemy Jang would face. Destiny was set in stone. Lucas could not reveal the truth, offering only his most sincere advice. But please, never lose your faith. With those final words, his tears fell. He had wept so much in his life. Long ago, as a young man, his wife fell terminally ill. Lucas had sobbed by her bedside, but his wife, ignoring her own pain, she had worn a beautiful, sincere smile until the very moment she closed her eyes forever. Now, Lucas could finally leave everything behind to reunite with her. Though his son was left in despair, Lucas transformed into a beam of light, merging with the vast sky as his son watched in silence. He watched his father vanish without a single goodbye. Meanwhile, in northern Russia, Tesu collapsed after his battle. Suddenly, Tesu began to chuckle, which spiraled into a hollow, bitter laugh directed at the cold heavens. "Ha ha, damn it! Ha!" His manic laughter echoed throughout the desolate, frozen wasteland. Behind Tesu, the monster lay dead, its body pierced through by the divine light of heaven. Despite his few diamond shards, he knew he had not dealt the killing blow. He recalled asking his brother as a child, "Brother, do you really have to do this?" "Listen, Tesu. The stronger we get, the larger our guild becomes. This is all for our father." Tesu hesitated to speak, but his brother silenced him before a heavy chain was wrapped around his neck. Gripping the chain with murderous intent, his brother's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "I told you to do it, you dog." Tesu shook his head frantically, crying out that he refused. But every resistance was met with a brutal strike, forcing Tesu into a state of agonizing submission. Trembling, he whispered, "Please, brother, do not die." Snapping back to the present, he remained sitting in silence, haunted by the ghosts of his past. Simultaneously, at Rusana's palace, in the oasis, she had witnessed Tesu's entire battle against the beast. "I know Lucas helped, but taking down that monster is still impressive." Soon, Tesu returned from the north. Rusana studied him closely before speaking. "As promised, I will share half of the Arctic mana stones." Before she could finish, Tesu cut her off coldly. "I have already taken them all." Rusana gasped in shock. "What?" Tesu replied indifferently. "I have already absorbed every single mana stone." "Why would you do that?" Rusana screamed in fury. "Your body will not be able to handle it." The moment those words left her lips, Tesu, yet Rusana didn't show even a flicker of fear. With a casual flick of her wrist, she issued a cold command, "Answer me, ... The crushing weight of Rusana's invisible aura instantly sent Tesu spiraling backward. Struggling to claw his way back up, he muttered in a trembling, ragged voice, "Someone I absolutely must kill." Inch by painful inch, Tesu dragged himself toward Rusana, his expression twisting into a mask of pure malice. "So, ... why don't you just die already?" He threw himself into another desperate strike, but Rusana had already seen through his movements. With a sharp gesture, a massive force slammed down on him, and fresh blood sprayed across the floor. Her voice remained ice cold as she looked down at him. "Those mana stones could have amplified a hunter's power 10 times over. Did you really consume them all just for such a pathetic reason?" As she spoke, her knuckles turned white against the arm of her throne, her quiet fury finally boiling over. Rusana stepped down from her pedestal. She let out a sharp scoff. "Do you truly have no intention of fighting for Russia?" But before she could finish, dozens of spectral clones of Tesu, they swarmed in to attack, but Rusana was a step ahead, crushing every shadow that dared to approach. The iron scent of fresh blood immediately choked the air. Standing just a few paces away, you watched in horror as blood splattered across her face, her entire body beginning to shake. Seeing her distress, Tesu quickly conjured a protective barrier around you. "Speak again." "Fine then, if that's your choice." Before the words could land, Tesu charged again with blinding speed. Rusana remained perfectly still, simply whispering. With a wave of her hand, a barrage of lethal projectiles. Before the impact could shatter her, taking the full brunt of the explosion. In that moment, a sea of faces flashed through his mind. Every soul he had ever killed. Every power he had stolen. Kyung-chun was just one among the many he had consumed. Suddenly, countless shadows of Tae-soo rose again. Haunting masks. Like mindless puppets, they threw themselves forward in a suicidal frenzy. The number of lives Tae-soo had extinguished was now truly beyond counting. Now, the entire legion charged at Rusana simultaneously, her composure unshaken. Only when they were inches away did she snap her fingers. Tae-soo's clones detonated like macabre fireworks, lighting up the sky. Thundering explosions rocked the oasis, turning the Grand Palace into nothing more than a heap of smoldering ruins. Tae-soo collapsed to his knees on the charred earth, forced to look up at Rusana standing high above him. He tried to muster one last strike, but a sudden spatial rift began to pull him in, dragging Tae-soo back into the depths of his own past. He remembered being a young boy at the park, confessing to you that he had killed again. Even then, he knew his hands were stained with sin. You had rushed to him in a panic, but Tae-soo was already losing his mind. Screaming at the top of his lungs, "I don't want to kill. Please, I don't want to kill anymore." From the very moment he took that first life, he had stepped onto a path leading straight into the abyss. Whether he accepted it or not, the blood on his hands belonged to hundreds, and eventually millions of people. The voices of the dead constantly haunted him, asking why they had to die, but his monstrous nature simply shrugged them off. One more life meant nothing to him now. And now, Tae-soo was prepared to tear through Rusana just to claim what he desired. Meanwhile, Jiang remained frozen in place, the weight of Lucas's final words pressing down on his chest. After a long silence, he bowed his head, his tears hitting the cold. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pure relief. To Jiang, everything Lucas had warned him about sounded like total nonsense. What was so terrifying or cruel about this? His body was restored. In his mind, the nightmare was finally over. He could finally go back to his mother and live in peace. But it seemed his luck was cursed as if he had committed a great sin in a past life. Just as hope flickered to life, a complete stranger appeared out of nowhere and crushed Jiang's body. Looking down at the pool of blood beneath him, the man stepped back with a look of utter disgust. He frowned, muttering in annoyance, "Good grief, what is this mess?" Back at the palace, Rusana felt a jolt of genuine shock at the sheer intensity of Tae-soo's aura. In that split second of hesitation, her mind drifted back to a time long forgotten. Years ago, inside the Russian president's office, a man lay broken on the floor, whispering in despair, "A monster that can survive a nuclear blast. It's over for us." That was when a young woman entered with a report. "Mr. President, we can kill it using mana." That woman was Rusana, who at the time served only as the Minister of National Defense. The president looked up, shaking his head hopelessly. "It's too late. We've already launched every remaining nuclear warhead on the planet." Rusana's eyes widened in horror, but the president had already descended into madness. "Let's all just burn together." Looking out the window, Rusana watched as the sky filled with the trails of countless missiles, marking the end of the world. She snarled, "Damn it," and bolted outside. Rusana unleashed her power to stop the nuclear blast. Suddenly, a massive hand materialized. A thunderous boom echoed as flames engulfed the horizon. The president watched, paralyzed by pure shock. Rusana returned instantly and lunged at the president. He collapsed, trembling and begging for mercy. "Save me," he cried. Rusana hesitated, her hands shaking as she whispered. Tears streamed down her face. She gritted her teeth, muttering, "No, father. I'm doing what's right." Nearby sat a family photo, a happier time, featuring both the president and a young Rusana. But reality was cold. Rusana struck, and blood sprayed, staining that final memory. With the deed done, Rusana turned toward the wall. She stood silently before his portrait, offering a final moment of mourning for her father. Suddenly, news broke. Russia's nuclear aggression was confirmed. For world peace, the US would now annihilate Russia. Rusana panicked, screaming into the comms. "This is Defense Minister Rusana. The president is dead. We surrender." The US envoy just scoffed, flipping her off. Bullshit. This is how total war works now. Just then, the small, innocent voices of children calling for mummy. Rusana spun around, her heart racing. It's too dangerous. I told you kids to stay away. The two children rushed forward, sobbing as they clung to her legs. Mummy, Rusana sighed, defeated. Map, Elisa. She wanted to speak, but seeing them, she just broke down and held them tight. I'll protect you, she promised. Rusana knew her children couldn't survive in this world without her. Facing the approaching Tsu, all her fear vanished, replaced by a mother's fierce resolve. You think I'd lose to a bastard like you? She roared. But suddenly, her eyes went wide and hollow. Dozens of jagged spikes erupted through her body, killing her instantly where she stood. She had failed her promise. She couldn't even say one last goodbye to her precious children. Elsewhere in Russia's awakened district, the children waited anxiously. The hunters will be safe, right? The nanny nodded gently. Of course. They'll win and be home before you know it. But we're awakened too, the kids insisted. We can fight for our home. The nanny sighed. Map, Elisa, ... The Queen will protect us all. Before she could finish, she exploded. Blood sprayed the children as their home turned to rubble. Strands of mana shimmered in the air. Elisa stood frozen, paralyzed by the sheer horror. Tu emerged like a monster from a nightmare, his presence making Elisa tremble in terror. Tu stared coldly at the girl for a long moment. The mana threads vanished. Confused and trembling, Elisa could only watch his retreating back in stunned silence. Perhaps Jang's bloody face flashed in his mind. Don't sweat it, he muttered, leaving. Meanwhile, in Korea, Jang was being stomped by a stranger. Resurrected by mana once more, Jang tried to crawl away with every ounce of his strength. The psycho watched his pathetic crawl. Jang cried for his mother, but the man crushed him again. But Jang's regeneration was monstrous. His body began to reform almost immediately. The madman kept killing him over and over. Flesh and bone were pulverized repeatedly, but the killer didn't show a hint of hesitation. Every cry for mum was cut short. Finally, the man spoke, clearly annoyed by the sound. What a weird, mournful rhythm. Why is a grown man crying for his mummy like a baby? Rage exploded within Jang. He roared with every bit of spite he had left. You bastard, were you born from a rock? The man just kicked him into the blood gate. Jang didn't even hesitate this time. He plunged straight into the crimson portal. At the association, Jang's mother bolted upright. She saw Yumin and whispered, Where am I? Yumin replied calmly, The Hunter Association. She urged them to evacuate immediately, for the headquarters was on the verge of collapse. The three then retreated to the secondary bunker. However, disaster struck mid-transit as a sudden cavern tore the group apart, leaving them separated. Yuin glanced back, her brow furrowed in concern. There lay Diang, buried deep beneath the crushing ruins. Mother Jang saw the horror too. Witnessing her son's blood-soaked face, Armin spoke up, Good morning. We have reached the safety of the secondary shelter. But Diang's mother couldn't hear a word. She trembled and whispered, No. That monster cannot be my son. She clutched her head, desperate to deny the truth. Yet, Uman coldly forced her to face the brutal reality. He is your 23-year-old son, Jang. An accident occurred, and he was trapped within the blood gate. He escaped, but at the cost of his humanity. His mother refused to listen, but Yumin held her firm. Her voice grew sharp. He stopped the Bloodgate's explosion and fought alongside hunters worldwide. Just to save you. Stunned Mother Jang stared at the screen. There, her son was being brutally trampled by that heartless madman. Meanwhile, Jang opened his eyes after being cast into the Bloodgate. He looked around in a daze, slowly realizing he was standing in his own house once again. For a fleeting moment, he thought he'd returned to the past. Desperate for answers, he threw the door open. "Mom!" he called out. He saw her silhouette, but as she turned, a horrific monster smiled back at him. In that terrifying instant, Jang realized exactly where he was. The cruel reality set in. He was still inside the Bloodgate. He let out a soul-shattering scream. He remembered his father's passing. As a child, he had anxiously asked, "Mom, are you okay?" His mother had wiped her tears away quickly, forcing a reply. "I'm fine, my dear." Plagued by guilt, he began to apologize, but she smiled gently. "Jang, you just need to keep smiling." She promised a smile would fix everything. But after all this suffering, those words felt like a mockery. He had endured endless agony, yet the tragedies continued to rain down on him without mercy. Just when happiness seemed within reach, destiny dragged him back into the depths of the Bloodgate. The internal mana began twisting his flesh, forcing that hideous, monstrous form to manifest once again. Forced into monstrosity by fate, he watched the madman turn to leave, but a sudden noise stopped him cold. Jang lunged from the gate, pinning the man down. He threw his head back and laughed a hollow, sorrowful sound. "It's all your fault." He poured his absolute fury into a relentless barrage of strikes. Eventually, Jung backed away, his expression twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He gritted his teeth, demanding an answer. "Why? Why would you do this to me?" The man stood frozen in shock. When no answer came, Jang's rage exploded into another frenzied assault. "You bastard!" The man narrowly dodged, but Jang's pursuit was relentless. Like a moth to a flame, Jang's power surged. He fought with a murderous intent that the opponent barely withstood. Flashback to a few days ago, within a grand hall in the heart of China. A high-stakes meeting was underway. That monster is on another level. Even the United States fell before it. Can we even stand a chance? Hearing the fear, China's second-ranked let out a sneer. "How pathetic. Do you truly think my own brother would lose to such a creature?" Indeed, the one currently clashing with Jang was Ling Kuang, China's top-ranked SSS powerhouse. However, Ling Kuang was struggling. He never expected the monster he faced to possess such overwhelming strength. China suppressed gates with sheer numbers, leading some elite hunters to break free from national control. Notable rebels included the S-rank monk, Dam Ho Chi. Along with masters from MI and the Beggar sect, they aimed to unify and lead a new generation. Their leader was the legendary SSS hunter of the Washan sect, Tai. But Ailmin was slaughtered, and his entire coalition met the same gruesome end. They were all annihilated by the two brothers. Standing atop corpses, Chu Wei spoke coldly. "This is our way of unifying China." Ling Guang simply replied, "Indeed." That was how the nation was unified, all through his absolute, illogical strength. Returning to the present. Amidst the clash, with Zhang Lingguang regained his composure. He swung his spear, painting the air with the thick scent of fresh blood. He trampled over the remains of Dai Yi with cold indifference. With a cold smirk, he said, "I came, seeking the strong." And damn, instantly, Zhang's body began to reform. Zhang lunged forward in a rage, shouting, "Damn you." Hearing this, Lingguang braced himself and swung his spear, his movements as fluid as a dance of death. Countless blades of light tore through Dai Yi. The force even sliced through the nearby skyscraper. With a deafening crash, the building crumbled into ruins. Lingguang laughed. This is just too much fun. Suddenly, Dai Yi reappeared right behind him. Yeah, I'm having a blast too, you son of a bitch. With that, he delivered a devastating kick to Lingguang. A massive explosion rocked the area, sending clouds of dust swirling into the sky. As the dust settled, Lingguang had caught Jang's hand. He spoke slowly. I'm confused. I came for a legendary monster, but you're just a human. Dai Yi scoffed, tearing his hand free and lunging with a lethal claw strike. Lingguang vanished and reappeared behind him. And yet, he whispered, your mana screams monster. Jang pouted, so what? Before he could react, Lingguang was already right in his face. Another shockwave erupted, sending debris and thick smoke. Lingguang excitedly licked his lips. Monsters don't protect others, so you must be hiding something or someone. Jang went silent. After a long hesitation, he finally spoke. You're right. My mother, ... She abandoned me, yet I still love her. Lingguang nodded, sensing a tragic past. At that moment, a sudden memory flickered through Lingguang's mind. Lingguang winked. My sister and I are polar opposites. Men naturally crave being the strongest, itching for a real fight. So if you're strong, Jang, I'll just have to crush you. Lingguang raised a provocative eyebrow. Come on. Instantly, Jang's fist came flying. But Jang wasn't aiming for him, he was targeting the monster on his spear. Lingguang quickly parried him back. Unfazed, Shang pressed his assault. He grinned. Now I'm starting to have some fun, too. But as he prepared to strike, a chilling voice cried out from the spear. Jang didn't hesitate. He delivered a brutal horizontal slash, obliterating the entity on the spear. Lingguang remained calm, summoning an arsenal of weapons. Jang narrowed his eyes, clutching a severed eyeball. Lingguang explained, this is a sentient blade. Pretty cool, right? Lingguang teased. Dai Yi scoffed and lunged at him once more. Simultaneously, Lingguang's blade flashed, but in seconds, his head reformed as he... The force sent Lingguang flying, slamming him hard against the crumbling wall. An old man with a cane emerged. S-rank, blacksmith, yak bang. Lingguang glanced over. So, you're here. Did you finish collecting the hunters? Bang nodded. Indeed. I have about 40 of them. Satisfied with the answer, Lingguang issued a cold command. Now, do your job. Lingguang charged back at Jang. Bang nodded and began his grim work. Ignoring the chaos, the blacksmith's hammer fell relentlessly. Jang froze at the rhythmic sound. The hammering was deafening. To Jang, it sounded like the corpses were screaming from within. A moment later, the hammer finally stopped. Drenched in sweat, Bang panted, "It's done." He dragged a grotesque mass toward Lingguang. The mass wailed in agony. Lingguang grinned. A true masterpiece. My thanks. With a heave, he hurled the colossal mass of flesh directly at Jang. Jang scrambled back, but the haunting screams from the flesh mass made him grimace in horror. Jang reached out and touched a head wailing for its daughter, then another crying for its mother. Without hesitation, Jang dragged them out and crushed them into nothingness with his bare hands. What a touching family reunion, he sneered, as Lingguang's massive tumor lunged toward him. Maddened screams pierced his ears. Kill me. Stay away, do not touch me. Hearing them, Jang smirked. How poetic every fool, slaughtered by monsters, had gathered right here. He had ended countless lives, just like theirs. They lived as losers, and died as such. With a cold snort, Jang unleashed a frenzied strike. Simultaneously, Lang Swang leveled his weapon. I make it a point to record every battle. 5 years ago, he had acquired a very special eye from South Korea. This sentient sword's mana belonged to Jang's childhood friend, the one Jang had personally decapitated before. Now, that friend's severed head stared back at Jang repurposed as Lang Kwang's cruel weapon. Memories of his friend flooded Jang's mind. Lang Kwang mocked, "You only run, you pathetic coward." He swung his blade, raining strikes upon an unresisting Jang. Lang Kwang turned away without a glance, as Jang was literally hacked deep within his subconscious, drowning in a sea of absolute despair. He could not face the world anymore, but suddenly, his long-lost friend appeared before him. "It is okay, buddy. We are friends," he whispered, yet Jang's tears would not stop. The memory of decapitating his only friend surged back, driving Jang into a violent frenzy. His friend's agonizing screams continued to echo relentlessly deep within Jang's tormented mind. "Help me, my eyes hurt." Remembering his mother's terrified face, Jang finally snapped into madness. His eyes burned with ferocity. He burst into laughter, sound far more hideous than sobbing. Jang's laughter turned psychopathic. Without hesitation, he began to hack off his own head. As his head regenerated, he cut it off again. Blessed with immortality, death meant nothing. Ignoring the agony, he repeatedly decapitated himself. Lang Kwang watched with a mocking sneer. Jang laughed until he cried, sounding utterly heartbroken. Only when a mountain of severed heads piled at his feet did Jang finally stop. "Do you still intend to kill me?" Meanwhile in China, Xu Vian thought of Lang Kwang. She frowned, wondering if he was truly enjoying the thrill of the battle over there. Suddenly, a puppet rushed in, shouting that the Northern Hunter Squad had been completely annihilated. As those words echoed, Chu Vian's eyes widened in horror. She never imagined one person could destroy her entire army. At Northern Dragon Castle, Tao stood amidst the ruins he created. Suddenly, Tu's head twisted unnaturally. Mana threads appeared, jerking his head like a broken puppet. Widu rushed to embrace him, pleading for him to stop this self-destructive madness immediately. But after hearing that, Tao simply shook his head. He recalled the past, asking Jang about his superpower. Jang had only looked away, confused. "It is regeneration," Jang replied, only to be met with Tu's heavy, "Disgusting freak, get lost." Tao spat. Tao spat. Jang's words had somehow struck a very sensitive nerve. Tu's expression darkened, blaming Jang for every tragedy. Meanwhile, back in Korea, a hysterical Jang laughed through his tears, leaving Lang Kwang stunned. Snapping out of it, Lang Kwang lunged forward and delivered a brutal kick to Jang's face. He swung his blade, severing Jang's limbs. Yet, Jang's body began regenerating immediately. Aware of this, Lang Kwang launched a savage assault. As the blade danced, Jang was shredded again. But with one eye remaining, mana surged forth. Lang Kwang wasted no time and triggered the hilt mechanism. Instantly, his razor-sharp blade transformed into a massive long spear. He unleashed a devastating horizontal sweep. With a thunderous boom, refusing to give him a moment to breathe, Lang Kwang lunged forward, his strike tearing through the boy's body. Yet moments later, a fully healed body rose from the earth. Lang Kwang didn't hesitate, skillfully thrusting his spear directly into Diang's eye. But at that gruesome moment, Jang's lips curled into a terrifying, eerie smile. He sat up, ignoring his face being shredded by the spear. Diang lunged, thrusting his razor-sharp claws toward Lang Kwang's throat. Lang Kwang countered by channeling mana into his spear. An explosion tore Diang apart, but seconds later, a pale hand crawled from the gore to seize him. Like two demons, they clashed violently amidst the crumbling ruins of the high-rise buildings. Under the sheer weight of Lang Kwang's ferocious assault, The structures around them were reduced to nothing but dust and debris. He showed no mercy to Jang. His long spear rained down like a relentless storm of steel. Finally, Diang could no longer endure the pressure. The spear skewered him, leaving his limp body to collapse. Without a struggle, Diang let himself fall, sinking as if plunging into a deep, dark abyss of water. He gasped for air, but the cold water choked his throat. Suddenly, a memory of his mother's voice surfaced. She once told him to just keep smiling, but in this hellish nightmare, was a smile even possible? Driven to madness, Diang forced a grin. A distorted expression more painful than weeping. After his final strike on Jang, distorted dimension, a violent vortex of mana, appeared, radiating overwhelming power. From the swirling darkness, Diang crawled out once more. He looked like a vengeful spirit, escaping the gates of hell, his appearance truly nightmarish and revolting. Lang Quang frowned at the sight, but before he could react, a cold blade sliced across his neck. His head was severed, yet he calmly reattached it, like a twisted puppet. The wound closed as if the strike never happened. Diang stared in disbelief, but a new anomaly occurred. A strange green liquid began corroding Lang Quang's face and arm, ignoring the rot, eating his flesh. Lang Quang crushed Diang's skull and shattered his body with a brutal kick. Yet Jang's form instantly reconstructed itself again. Lang Quang didn't delay, hurling his spear. Countless streaks of lethal light danced through the air, completely shredding Jang's physical form. Still unsatisfied, Lang Quang continued his frenzied assault, refusing to grant his enemy a second of peace. In a heartbeat, Jang was impaled by dozens of spears, and his head was cleanly decapitated from his shoulders. As the head tumbled, a dark energy enveloped it. Even in death, that severed head wore a haunting, twisted smile. Diang stood there, gazing upward as that orb of energy descended. It streaked down like a falling star. Lang Quang watched in a daze, unable to react to the incoming project. By the time he realized the danger, the head had transformed into Diang, whose claws buried deep into him, spraying blood everywhere. Meanwhile, in China, Tae Su was being pinned to the ground by the formidable Xie. She sat there nonchalantly, casually swirling a lollipop in her mouth, without a care in the world. Finally, she spat it out and smirked. "So, you're the one who killed my men." At that moment, both Tu and Yu were completely neutralized. Chu Vi narrowed her eyes at Tu and let out a cold snort. "Now, you'll face 100 million hunters all by yourself." Behind her stood an endless legion of hunters all. Amidst a sudden explosion and rising smoke, Tu managed to grab you and escape. You looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Tu, why are you being so stubborn about this?" Tu gritted his teeth and hissed, "I can't let it go. Kang Jang. I must kill that bastard myself." Behind them, millions of puppet hunters closed in. Long ago, the three of them used to skip class in the flower forest. Suddenly, Tho had spoken up with a serious expression. He warned that hunters worldwide would eventually swarm Korea. He told Tu that if he fell in battle, Tu must absorb their mana. Toy's eyes widened in absolute shock. "How could I ever do something like that to you?" Tho cut him off with a firm shake of his head. "This way, even if we die, we'll live on through you. We're friends, aren't we?" Beneath the blooming trees, those three scoundrels made a secret, solemn oath to one another. They promised to stay together forever, no matter what dark path they walked. But karma is a cruel master, and you reap what you sow. Those who live like dogs find no glory. In the end, only their leader, Tu, remained. Tu felt his promise was broken because of Jang now. He sought blood to avenge his fallen friend. Yeju sighed in exasperation. In Toy's memories of the flower forests, after hearing though, he spoke with icy malice. "Every one of you will die today." Ha ha. That chilling laugh, perched on a branch, Han to glared down with murderous intent. Damn it. Have you completely lost your mind? Now, standing before a dark cavern, Tu declared with grim determination, I will have my revenge from my brothers. He vanished into the shadows, leaving Yeju stunned. She couldn't understand what had turned him into this monster. Soon, Tu faced the puppet legion of Chu. Her terrifying gift allowed her to resurrect the dead, binding fallen hunters to her absolute will. By raising China's elite, she became the nation's living incarnation. This was the powerhouse Tu now challenged. Even a legend like Xie Chuvai felt a chill. Before her, countless phantoms of Tu began to flicker. Calling him Triple S rank was an understatement. Tu had transcended the very limits of human understanding. He had evolved beyond humanity. Facing the massive horde, Tu's primal survival instincts surged without fear. Even without a conscious mind, his sheer presence forced the puppet army to instinctively recoil in terror. Sensing danger, Xie Chuvai unleashed her power and shrieked, I am right behind you, kill him. Bolstered by her command, the puppet surged forward again. Death was meaningless, for Xie Chuvai would raise them endlessly. Keep fighting, she roared. Crush him. But Tu was a force of nature, slaughtering his way through the horde in a blood-soaked frenzy. In his dark past, Tu had shattered countless lives. He was a demon of pure madness. Yet Xie Chuvai remained oblivious, casually swirling a lollipop. I am the pride of China, she scoffed. Do you truly think a worm like you can win? Before she could finish, Tu blitzed her. Yes. A flash of steel, and her head tumbled away. In the final moment of her death, her life flashed before her eyes. She remembered a grand palace being stormed by the Mount Hua sect. He leveled his blade at a kneeling woman. Despite being captured, she barked defiantly. You bastards! She screamed, claiming this land had belonged to her clan for generations. Joman's sword descended without mercy, severing her head in one brutal stroke. Her head rolled into the shadows where two children hid the young siblings, Lang Kuang and Xie. Young Xie Chuvai sobbed in terror, while Lang Kuang watched with hollow eyes. He asked. He claimed their parents died for one simple reason. They were far too weak. Horrified, Xie Chuvai asked if he felt no pain. Lang Kuang simply shrugged. Why should I be sad? I will become strong and kill them all. From that day, they clawed their way to the top. But now, at the end of the road, Xie Chuvai had finally been defeated. In her final breath, she realized her brother was right. She was dying because she was weak. Tu walked to her severed head, took the lollipop from her hand. As the sweetness spread, his cold, indifferent expression mirrored the very woman he had just killed. Meanwhile, on another part of the battlefield, during the clash between Jang and Lang Kuang, Jang forced open the blood gate, dragging his foe toward the abyss. Lang Kuang frowned as the gate's hunger intensified. The crimson vortex swallowed him. Jang's triumphant smile vanished as a handshot from the gate, gripping his leg and dragging him down to. Lang Kuang's eyes flared as he injected a lethal toxin into Jang. Lang Kuang grinned through the chaos. So, this is the hell you crawled out of. Unbelievable, he chuckled. No wonder you possess such monstrous strength. He lunged forward with a roar. I'll admit it. Of everyone I've faced, you are the strongest. With a thunderous boom, Lang Kuang buried a devastating fist deep into Jang's stomach. A blinding flash erupts as Diang's body is torn into fragments. Yet Lang Kuang shows no mercy, lunging forward once more. He sneers coldly. You shall be the first to witness the true power of this technique. Poison mastery. This is what created this art. In a heartbeat, strange objects manifest in the air, fusing into a lethal spike. It plunges into Jang's body, forcing a gut-wrenching scream from his throat. Lang Kuang stands over him, smirking at the carnage. Well, what do you think? Can you even hope to resist? But before he can finish, Diang suddenly swings a desperate Caught off guard, Lang Kuang is slashed deep. In an instant, The boy has closed the distance again. Lang Kwang can't identify this sensation. It's better than the first candy he ever tasted, or even his father's rare smile. He remembers his first victory, then the second and third. By the time he was a young man, he had claimed 9. As the years passed, he survived countless wars, and his tally of triumphs reached a staggering 1 million. Yet here, in this clash with Lang Kwang feels a thrill greater than all those victories combined. Why? He doesn't truly know. Suddenly, the poison erupts with newfound fury. A massive toxic vortex swirls in the air, dragging both Lang Kwang and Jang into its deadly center. Lang Kwang remains unscathed, but the poison slowly corrodes Diang's flesh. Soon, Lang Kwang merges entirely with the venom. A ghastly grin spreads across his face as a shadow of the past A woman once whispered that she loved him, but he never understood what love truly was. After countless women had passed through his life, she had leaned over him. He would finally understand. Snapping back to the present, the poison fuses into his body as he and Diang are pulled together. They become one, two souls bound tightly by the adhesive power of the lethal toxin. Simultaneously, the bloodgate surges with mana to revive Ji Yang. Together, they vanish into the eye of the poisonous storm. Violent threads of mana collide. In that instant, their bodies fuse, and their deepest memories are laid bare to one another. Two tragic films of their pasts play out, revealing the agonizing burdens they both carried. The sheer scale of their mana fluctuation causes the entire building to groan and fracture. It collapses instantly, a mountain of debris, crushing both Jang and Lang Kwang beneath it. Fragments of Jang's body lie scattered, yet they slowly begin to pulse and reform. At the Hunter Association's shelter, Yuman tends to Jang's mother. She asks softly. His mother doesn't answer. Her eyes are glued to the screen as she trembles. Whispering. Yuman follows her gaze, her expression clouded with thought. Meanwhile, in China, Yeju waits at the cave. Panic strikes her as Taesu returns, but one of his arms has completely vanished. Yeju rushes to him, sobbing. Do you know how worried I was? But Taesu stands there, like a hollow doll. His head tilts oddly as he mutters, How? How did this happen? Unloved by his father, neglected by his mother, and forced to kill by his brother. He only ever wanted to be loved. Knowing his pain, Yeju pulls him into a tight embrace. Taesu mumbles about memories of a murdered family and needing to leave. His eyes drift toward the light in the abyss, his gestures full of bitter irony and madness. He continues his senseless rambling as Yeju holds him tight. In their moment of distraction, a figure approaches. Yeju looks up to see a girl with a terrifying scar across her face. Are you Hanam, the Japanese hunter? She asks. What are you doing here? The woman is indeed Han. She speaks slowly. I heard you're gathering forces to take revenge on Kang Jang. Taesu tilts his head back with a dark smirk. You want to be my strength? Hanam replies coldly. I'm not the only one. I heard you have a hunter who can revive the dead. Yagu frowns at the request, but Han remains desperate and sincere. She pleads quietly, Please, ... Save this person. She holds out a severed head for Taesu to see. It is Ruto's head, frozen in time. Han explains, We are Japan's strongest. We will be useful to you. Hearing this, Taesu erupts into laughter before his gaze turns icy. In a flash, he beheads Han, placing her beside Ruto. The two of them were finally reunited at last. In that heavy silence, Taesu's voice suddenly rang out. The moment the words left his lips, a figure burning like molten lava lunged at him. Tragically, before it could even lay a finger on Taesu, he had already sliced its head clean off. That lava-like body exploded into 1,000 pieces, leaving nothing behind but the severed head clutched firmly in Tu's hand. In that instant, threads of mana began pouring from Shattered fragments of memory slowly pieced themselves together, flashing vividly before Tu's eyes. After witnessing the truth, he couldn't help but shield his face, his eyes overflowing with unbearable agony. Back in South Korea, after his body had finished regenerating, DY struggled to his feet and began to run. It was likely a grim memento from Lang Kwong. As for Lang Kwong, he was now a mere shell of a man, his limbs severed and only half his torso remaining. In that desperate state, he suddenly cried out for Kang Jang. What little remained of Lang Kwong's mangled body twitched violently as he screamed like a madman. Kang Jang. Once more, their foreheads pressed together. Lang Kwong gasped for air, his breath coming in ragged bursts. How very interesting. Long ago, Lang Kwong's father had told him that he must become strong to endure another moment of humiliation. Tears streamed down the man's face as he pleaded, "Become strong enough to even strike down your own father." The words had barely faded when Lang Kwong swung his hand. Cold stroke. He wailed for his father even as he raised his hand in victory. Before the gates engulfed in a sea of flames that day, Lang Kwong killed his father, igniting a ruthless thirst for power within his soul. Now, in the present, Lang Kwong had finally tasted defeat at the hands of He muttered "father" twice, before his head slumped forward for the final time. The light of life faded completely. Lang Kwong was gone. Just then, someone approached the scene. The blacksmith that Lang Kwong had brought along to the Kickbang faction. He knelt beside Lang Kwong's corpse and raised his hammer high. With those words, he brought the heavy hammer crashing down upon Lang Kwong's body. The rhythmic sound of the hammer echoed through the air as he ruthlessly pulverized the remains into nothingness. Kickbang seemed to have been swallowed by a frantic madness. Meanwhile, exhausted from the brutal battle, DY stood frozen, lost in a daze. He glanced at the wreckage behind him. Some people had been impaled by steel beams, while others lay crushed beneath massive stones. It was a scene of utter devastation, too gruesome to look upon. Countless lives were lost, and the earth was submerged in a sea of blood. All of South Korea was now draped in a terrifying, crimson shroud. Suddenly, a stray iron rod flew out of nowhere. When he looked closer, he saw a corpse impaled by steel. Another survivor crawled out, driving the rod into his skull. The survivor's face was twisted into a mask of pure horror. After plunging the iron into Jang's head hung heavily as a mob of people appeared from the shadows, surrounding him in a matter of heartbeats. Their faces were contorted with an unbridled, terrifying rage. They began a relentless assault on DY, pouring every ounce of their fury into their strikes, determined to beat the life out of him. Blood splattered across the ground in an instant. Jang's body was being pummeled into a pulp, amidst a storm of hateful, "Die, you monster, you beast! My daughter is gone. Why won't a freak like you just vanish from this world?" DY was beaten until he was barely recognizable. They callously drove a car right over his broken body, lying there as a mangled mass of flesh. His only thought in that moment was that he would never be able to see his mother again. Then, someone approached with a saw, intent on cutting out the last remaining eye from the bloody remains on the ground. Suddenly, a piercing scream rang out. Through the haze, DY saw the faint silhouette of his mother. Yuman had managed to lead her there. Seeing what had become of her son, the mother rushed toward him, heart-shattering, crying out his name. But before she could even reach Jang, a stone flew through the air and struck her directly in the head. The sight was too much for DY to bear, and his tears began to fall. Tisu was now spiraling into a total mental breakdown, muttering incoherently. You watched from the side, overcome with worry, as he knelt there. He began speaking in riddles, sending you into a frantic panic as she broke down in tears. Unable to take it anymore, she whispered a tearful apology. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, raising her hand to knock him out. Years ago, in a dilapidated house within the city, Yu's family had struggled to survive. Her father was a pathetic drunkard who constantly beat his wife. Suffering from autism, would only whisper that she loved him despite the violence. To them, the opening of the gates and the rise of the awakened. Yu's mother lost control of her hidden powers and killed her husband on the spot. Because of her mental state and her children, she was given only a suspended sentence. Yu had truly hoped that life would finally get better, but her brother didn't see it that way. From that day on, he worked outside and brought that same cycle of abuse back into their home. He even raised his hand against their own mother. He was no different from their drunken father. It seemed violence was a hereditary curse. Yu's brother started by using his fists, but he soon escalated to using weapons. His brutality grew more severe and terrifying with every passing day. And then, the Ru awakened her ability. She believed that becoming a hunter and earning wealth would finally let her escape this living hell. These desperate thoughts were the only things swirling in her mind, but her brother had no intention of letting her go. While she slept, he dragged her outside and began a brutal, merciless assault. The Ru didn't even try to fight back, simply letting him beat her until she hovered on the thin line between life and death. Every night, she suffered the same horrific abuse. Her silent screams for help echoed in the darkness, but there was no one to hear them. That was until her mother happened upon the scene. She tried desperately to save her, but the heartless son simply kicked her to the ground. Only after brutalizing both mother and daughter did he finally feel satisfied. Seeing her mother lying there, the Ru couldn't stop her tears. She crawled toward her mother, wailing in absolute despair. Yet, her brother found her cries annoying and silenced her with a devastating slap. The Ru could only watch helplessly as she was beaten, her eyes fixed on her mother bleeding out on the cold ground. One day at the park, Tae-soo arrived to confess his sins. "I killed again. How many more? Until it stops. Our parents aren't even here anymore." He knew his power was a curse. Usually, she just offered comfort, but today? The Ru finally spoke up with a different tone. "I have finally awakened," she whispered. "It's a mana regulation ability. I can seal your power." Tae-soo cried out in joy. "Really?" The Ru simply nodded, her expression cold. "But first, could you kill just one more person for me?" She shed her coat, revealing a face battered and swollen beyond recognition. Moments later, their Ru led Tae-soo straight to her home. The moment her wretched brother opened the door, the insults began. "You worthless bitch, why the hell are you coming home so late?" He never expected Tae-soo to be there, and with one swift strike to the heart, Tae-soo killed him instantly on the spot. As the two teens stood paralyzed by their first kill, it was Tae-soo's older brother. He arrived and wrapped iron chains around Tae-soo's neck, coldly demanding, "What the hell are you doing?" Tae-soo tried to explain, his voice trembling. But his older brother refused to listen to a single word. He grabbed Tae-soo by the head and snarled. Wasn't killing all those people enough? He demanded to know if this murder was truly necessary. Seeing Tae-soo being beaten, the Ru moved to intervene. The brother seized her hand. "What the hell is this?" He spat. Tae-soo, desperate to protect their Ru, surged forward to escape, causing his brother to lose his footing. Seizing the opening, Daru activated her ability on Tae-soo's brother. Finally, able to move, Tae-soo called out with a trembling voice. Hearing him, the older man looked up. But in that instant, a forest of sharp spikes erupted from the earth, impaling him through the chest. In mere minutes, they had taken 2 lives. Overwhelmed, they could only cling to each other and sob. "What do we do now?" Tae-soo promised to always protect her. Together, they climbed to the top, leading their guild to legendary glory. But at this moment, Tae-soo had completely lost his mind. The Ru had no other choice but to act. He caught her hand in a vice-like grip. "What is this?" he asked coldly. She whispered, but he was a mindless beast who slaughtered her where she stood. By the time he realized the Ru was nothing but a pool of blood, he desperately tried to gather the remains of her life. It was too late. Taisu had killed both a puppet-reviving necromancer and a healer like the Ru. The clash of those opposing forces drove him to the brink, and he let out a harrowing, blood-curdling scream. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the crimson pool. Moments later, Taisu coughed up a spray of fresh blood. Falling to his knees in agony, his body shook violently. Then, driven by some dark impulse, he didn't stop until the earth beneath him had collapsed into a massive crater. Finally, the violence ceased. His figure suddenly blurred, as if tens of thousands of souls were fighting to seize control of his body. Taisu stood alone, his back radiating a profound sense of sorrow, before countless afterimages of himself suddenly bolted into the distance. Mana threads raced toward the other side of the earth. As Taisu sprinted toward the Bloodgate, he stood before it, lost in the echoes of the past. As the mana from the gate began to weave itself into his body, the power of countless Bloodgates surged into him. Gritting his teeth, he endured the excruciating pain. With both hands, he grasped the edges of the Bloodgate, forcing it shut. In an instant, the Bloodgate was sealed tight, and the flow of mana was severed completely. Back in South Korea, after seeing his mother struck by a stone, Jang recovered enough to crawl toward her, but someone gripped his shoulder. Jang's eyes overflowed with sorrow as tears began to fall. He gazed up at Yumin, desperately searching for a sign, but she remained chillingly silent. His gaze then shifted toward the crowd behind him. The very monsters who had pelted his mother with stones. In an instant, the mana within Jang's body, within seconds, his physical form was completely restored. Yumin finally spoke. "Death is our inevitable destiny." He refused to simply surrender to such a cruel fate. Everything he had done, it was all for the sake of bringing his mother back to life. Consumed by sheer fury, Jang's body began to warp. Red marks scarred his chest, his human face twisting into a primal beast. Witnessing this, his mother stood frozen in shock. She saw not a monster, but the precious child she once cradled in her arms. Her body suddenly convulsed. After a moment of hesitation, the mother began to stagger toward her transformed son. She had nearly abandoned her son once in the past. In this final moment, she refused to let history repeat itself. To her, the creature was still just her little boy. She stepped toward him, just as she used to comfort him. When he cried as a child, her hand reached out to touch his skeletal chest. At that moment, Jang couldn't help but let out a trembling cry for his mother. She nodded gently. "Yes, I'm here." Finally, reunited with her son, the mother's tears flowed without end. Through her sobs, she whispered, "My son, no matter what happens, I will always love you." But before she could finish, two hands emerged and brutally tore her head away. As blood stained the earth, the killer's face was revealed. It was Taisu. Then, without a word, he severed Jang's head from his body. The surrounding crowd erupted into whispers. Was that really Han Taisu, the legendary hunter from the Kang Guild? Is he still alive? Ignoring the noise, Tishu spoke coldly. "I've sealed almost every gate on Earth. This was the final one, the one currently pulling Jang into its depths." Taisu's mana flared up instantly, causing the very skin on his face to crack under the immense pressure. "Farewell, Kang Jang," he sneered. Jang's eyes burned with a sudden, violent flash of pure resentment. He was so close to a happy life with his mother. Yet Taisu had cast him back into the Bloodgate once again. Just like 5 years ago, it was this man who had shattered every single one of his hopes and dreams. If there was one man Jang loathed more than anything, and now, he was falling into the abyss once more. The starving monsters within lunged. The moment he fell, with no time to think, Jang scrambled to his feet. But he wasn't the same weakling from years ago. He had become far, far more powerful. Jang's claws tore through flesh relentlessly, turning the battlefield into a literal rain of crimson blood. He slaughtered them one by one. It didn't matter how many came at him, he would kill every single one of those bastards. In a short time, a mountain of monster corpses. Finally, his exhausted legs gave out. As he lay there, broken, Tezu's mocking face appeared in his vision. That arrogant smirk seemed to be laughing at his misery. A fresh wave of hatred surged through Jang. He bit his lip until it bled, swearing a silent oath. Tezu must die. He vowed to escape this hell for revenge. Suddenly, a massive monster tried to crush him, but the ground beneath it gave way. Jang burst forth from beneath the beast, shattering its leg. Drenched in gore, he ignored the pain and continued his slaughter. Jang had to massacre every last one of them. Only then would the blood gate be forced open once more. He bit his lip again, his face a mask of pure vengeance. With a primal roar, he threw himself back into the fray. Meanwhile, at the Kayun Kang headquarters, the news was broadcasting a report on the Bloodgate tragedy from 6 years ago. They spoke of the man hailed as a national hero at the time, the hunter, Han Tezu. Suddenly, a diamond spike shattered the screen. It was Tezu. The two women beside him looked up, confused, asking what was wrong. "Shut your mouths," Tezu barked. Yet the women weren't intimidated, clinging to his arms with playful, flirtatious smiles. "Oh Tezu, why are you so cold?" Those words must have struck a nerve, because his eyes flared with a sudden, painful memory. In a flash of violence, the woman beside him was obliterated. Nothing remained of her but a gruesome pile of mangled flesh. The other woman trembled with pure terror at the bloody sight. She scrambled back, desperate to get away from the monster. Without looking back, she bolted out of the room, fleeing for her life. Just then, Yumin walked in, her voice cold and indifferent. "Lashing out won't ease the pain, Han Tezu." Draped in only a bath towel, she walked toward the bed without hesitation. She gently placed her hand on Tezu's cheek. "Han Tezu, in this entire world, I am the only one who can truly heal you." At those words, Tezu actually began to weep. He remembered that day, when he had pushed Jang into the Bloodgate. The crowd had never stopped chanting his name. Little did the cheering crowd know the price he paid today. Their mindless joy only fueled Tezu's simmering rage. Instantly, his mana threads danced, slaughtering them all. Amidst the falling rain, Tezu sought the park he once shared with ease. Drenched and broken, he sat alone on a swing, the very picture of a lonely, fallen king in the downpour. The adjacent swing hung shattered and empty. The one who used to sit there was now nothing but a memory. Grief finally shattered his resolve as his tears merged with the rain. Suddenly, Yuminin emerged from the shadows behind him. She embraced him tenderly from behind. From that fateful day onward, she had never truly left Tezu's side. Tezu scoffed coldly, recalling her past aid to Kang Jang. Before he could finish his thought, Yumin sharply cut him off. "Do you not wish to see it again?" Tezu's brow furrowed in confusion. "See what?" he demanded, his voice icy. Kang Jin, ignoring his tone, she spoke of the mother he killed 6 years ago, and how he sealed the Bloodgate. She looked him in the eye and issued a chilling challenge. "Are you afraid? Is it because you've crushed every SSS rank hunter?" Enraged, Tezu seized her throat and pinned her down with lethal force. Tezu hissed through gritted teeth. "Yes." His face radiated a terrifying killing intent that momentarily stunned Yumin. Yet Tezu continued his dark confession regardless. "I even tried reopening the gate to finish him. I wondered if he'd feel the pain. But I failed. I'll tell you something interesting," she whispered. "By the laws of the universe, this world is destined for periodic collapse. In those moments, gates appear. Once they connect to the depths of hell, they transform into dreaded blood gates." Yumin continued, "You thought you trapped Jang in hell. But the master of that realm was destined to find him." Just as she predicted, Someone within the Blood Gate. The Dark Master of Hell himself. Humans suddenly turned the tables, pinning Taisu down with a sinister smirk. Which means you'll be seeing him very soon. Taisu's heart skipped a beat in pure terror. What the hell are you talking about? Just wait. You'd better stay alive until that day comes. With those parting words, she got off the bed to leave. Before she could exit, Taisu slammed her against the wall. Who are you? He demanded, his eyes burning with rage. Are you truly that curious? She mocked. A cruel smirk playing on her lips as she watched his frustration. I will give you a name. The Administrator of Hell. Once every gate becomes a blood gate, he is destined to lead his legion and annihilate this entire world. Betrayal has decimated hundreds of thousands of worlds. But this is the first time all the gates were successfully closed. Human explained that gates are governed by cosmic laws. Not even a being like Betrayal has the power to create them. However, Jang escaped from the depths of hell, creating massive, unstable rifts in the fabric of space. Taisu's eyes bulged in shock. Uman continued, with Betrayal's immense power, he can now force those rifts into new gates. When Jang fell back in, Betrayal sensed his human mana. Jang didn't die, he evolved into a true, terrifying monster. 6 years have passed, and Betrayal has finally tracked him down. Her words caused the very air to freeze. Suddenly Human spoke again with a chilling finality. It has begun. Taisu could only stare, his mind reeling. At a nearby theater, Jang's story began playing for all to see. On the massive screen, his monstrous form loomed. Mum, I had a nightmare, he whimpered. You were torn apart, and I've been a monster here for 6 years. Though Jang wielded Betrayal's divine power and could leave, knowing his exit would trigger the world's destruction. The screen shifted violently, showing a sea of monstrous faces, as Jang's voice cried out. Am I losing my mind? He screamed for his freedom and his vengeance, vowing to inflict the same hellish suffering upon He promised a pain so agonizing and absolute that Taisu wouldn't even be able to draw a single breath. Jang dreamt of disemboweling Taisu while he was still alive, yet he could not bring himself to harm the innocent. Suddenly, Jang froze, his monstrous face. Like a lost child, he muttered under his breath. But Mum. Didn't you know? I was a damn innocent person, too. Dad died in an accident, so why did Taisu break me? For 5 years, every kill was just for survival. Jang screamed that he had decimated all of Japan just for the desperate chance to save his mother's soul. He dismissed Lucas as a useless coward and spoke of others who chose death over helping him survive. If not for them, we'd be together. But it was a delusion. His mother had been gone for a long time. Jang questioned if Taisu would truly hunt down his mother regardless of his actions. Then, the screen flickered, shifting the scene once more. Staring into the distant void, Jang whispered. In the end, Mother, I will be honest with you. He confessed to the many innocent lives he had stolen, admitting that now, he simply wanted to watch them all perish. Watching from below, a figure spat out a venomous curse at the screen. With that, the cinematic reel of Jang's life reached its bitter end. The viewer could not help but let out a cold sneer. It was none other than Jang himself. Beside him lay the gruesome, severed remains of his own mother. Damn it, he hissed in frustration. Just when he thought the nightmare was over, the screen suddenly flashed with a final, unexpected epilogue. The text offered praise to the national hero, Tis. Thanks to his strength, the world had enjoyed a long, fragile era of peace. Everyone was drowning in joy as long as Jang was not there. He stood up to leave the theater, but a voice echoed from the screen. Wait, it is not over yet. Refusing to listen to any more nonsense. Jang struck out, shattering the screen into 1,000 pieces. In that instant, his mother's corpse began to stir. Her lips trembled as she whispered a final chilling truth. All is but a void. Paying no mind to the phantom words, Jang tore through the very fabric of space and stepped out into the world. The theater stood silent and empty. But as he reached the exit, Jang paused, a bitter smile crossing his face. I knew it all along. Simultaneously, a massive fracture split the Korean sky. Yumin watched helplessly as Tae-soo tore through the door. High above the horizon, a silhouette appeared, sporting two massive, ominous wings that spanned the sky. It was Jang. Tae-soo's eyes narrowed, meeting the hero's gaze with cold defiance. In that moment, Tae-soo's face began to warp and twist, his physical form blurring into an unstable, terrifying distortion. Yet, moments later, hundreds of thousands of Tae-soos, ready to clash with the monstrous legion looming before them. With a deafening boom, a cataclysmic explosion erupted, veiling the entire sky in a thick shroud of fire and ash. Jang charged forward, atop his monstrous steed. Not to be outdone, Tae-soo lunged back, igniting a fierce and desperate counter. The two titans collided in an instant, their silhouettes dancing across the heavens in a blur of lethal, godlike speed. Below them, the earth shook as the monster horde and Tae-soo's clones engaged in a brutal, blood-soaked massacre. High above, Jang's flying beast unleashed a beam of dark energy, sending Tae-soo crashing toward the earth. Jang looked down, mocking the hero's weakness. Pushed to his limit, Tae-soo manifested a massive diamond structure, which instantly transmuted into a powerful, soaring beast. Mounting his new creation, Tae-soo soared back into the sky. Aerial confrontation. Clang. The screeching ring of colliding steel. Weapons met. Their desperate struggle escalated until they broke past the atmosphere. The sheer volume of their mana caused the very air to scream in agony. In a distant land, within a quiet cottage, an elderly woman stood before her late husband's portrait. Suddenly, a stray bolt of pure energy tore through the house, obliterating her instantly and drenching the room in crimson. Jang and Tae-soo remained oblivious to the innocent life they had snuffed out, their tunnel vision locked on their mutual destruction, having already slain Russia's top ranker, Rusana, and China's second best. Tae-soo felt no fear facing a monster like Jang. At that very moment, the ominous floodgates creaked open once again, appearing across the shattered sky. Innocent civilians who could not escape were instantly shredded by the demons pouring out. The monster horde swarmed the streets. Just like years before, a figure resembling a divine angel descended from the heavens to intervene. As the people prepared for death, a silhouette wreathed in celestial light appeared, systematically purging the monsters with heavenly fire. This savior was the son of Lucas. Yet, as the monster count swelled, the world was once again plunged into a sea of grief. Meanwhile, Jang was ruthlessly pinning Tae-soo down. Countless bloodgates pulsed in the sky. Refusing to yield, Tae-soo activated the stolen abilities he had absorbed from his many fallen victims. To turn the tide, Jang prepared for the finishing blow, but his movement suddenly a hand had clamped onto his leg. He looked back to see a woman with a hideously distorted face, her hand encased in a layer of crystalline frost. In that moment, Jung felt a crushing isolation. A loneliness identical to when he had watched the reel of his own life alone. On the opposing side, a sea of spectral hands reached out to restrain him. Jang's brow furrowed, his eyes turning truly predatory. Capitalizing on the distraction, Tae-soo lunged with millions of mana threads, which coiled around Jang's neck like a tightening noose. Tae-soo's eyes gleamed with murderous intent, as the lethal mana threads began to vibrate violently in the cold air. But Jang was faster. He tore the threads apart with his bare hands before driving a devastating fist straight into Tae-soo's face. He slammed the hero into the earth with savage force. The ground shattered, leaving behind a massive, cratered void. Tae-soo fell helplessly into the icy depths, his mana leaking out like unraveling threads. The energy seemed sentient, surging toward Jang with a mind of its own. At that exact moment, a mysterious figure reached out and caught Tessu's falling body. Hunters from around the world had formed a grand alliance, standing ready to fight by his side. But wait, weren't these the very same people Tessu had once murdered? Jiyoung's brow furrowed in thought. I see what's happening now. Suddenly, ghostly strands of mana erupted from Tessu's eyes, representing every soul he had slaughtered in his dark past. Recognizing the trick, Jazang scoffed with pure disdain. So, that's your pathetic ability. Before he could say more, Tessu lunged from the depths, charging at Jang again. This time, Jang didn't even try to dodge. He took the hit and slammed into the ground, only to burst into a chilling fit of laughter. Jazang sat up with a cold, mocking smirk. So you're the one who actually killed him. He was referring to a famous hunter he'd seen on television. Narrowing his eyes at Tessu, he hissed. The question ignited Tessu's rage. He roared, but as the words left his lips, his head was clean, severed from his shoulders. In an instant, Tessu's world began to blur as his life flashed before his eyes. He remembered his childhood, the day of his power evaluation. When the result showed he hadn't awakened, he had whispered fearfully. Before he could finish, his father's heavy hand sent him spiraling to the floor. His mother could only watch from the side, trembling with helpless anxiety. Soon after, she became the target of the abuse. He could only cover his ears, trying to drown out his mother's agonizing screams. Eventually, Tessu couldn't take it anymore. Driven to the edge, he grabbed a kitchen knife and lunged forward to stop the monster. His father saw the attack coming and prepared to strike back. But fate intervened. Tessu tripped, his small body crashing into his father as the blade accidentally pierced the man's carotid artery. Blood sprayed everywhere in an instant. Strands of mana began to slither through the air, infusing themselves into Tessu's grieving. Broken heart. In that moment, he inherited his father's power. Horrified by the carnage, his mother fled the house in terror, leaving a devastated Tessu sobbing on the ground. But he wasn't alone in that house. His older brother approached their father's corpse and called out in a low voice, "Han-Tessu." At the sound of his name, Tessu turned his head. Instead of a kind word, his brother took a heavy iron chain and wrapped it around Tessu's neck. Like he was nothing more than a pet. That was the day his true tragedy began. Memories of his life with the zoo played out in his mind like a twisted, flickering film reel. In the end, he had killed the zoo with his own hands, transforming into a creature that was neither human nor ghost. Back in the present, within the Chemcon Guild headquarters, a sea of faceless victims haunted his subconscious. Their features were a blur, but the weight of their suffering felt agonizingly real. Tessu carried the burden of every life he'd taken, including those who had shared his childhood trauma. His head throbbed as if it were being crushed, making every breath a struggle. Piercing voices of accusation echoed in his ears, jarring Tessu awake from his living nightmare. Yuminin was sitting right beside him. As he stirred, she looked at him with a gaze that felt chillingly detached. "It's happening again, isn't it? You must be in agony." The mana, the memories. Just how many souls are trapped inside you? Tessu didn't have an answer. Countless mana threads coiled within him, representing victims he had long ago lost count of. Biting his lip until it bled, Tessu rasped, "Can you seal away these abilities?" Yuminian simply shook her head. "No, I can't do that. I'm only a healer. Isn't this something you have to handle on your own?" Hearing those words, Tessu covered his face in despair, muttering under his breath, "Damn it. No, it's impossible." He crawled off the bed and collapsed onto his knees. "I'm so tired," he whispered. "I can't let this go on anymore." Yet, a single flicker of hope remained in his heart, like the lone lamp in his room. "The zoo," he murmured. "I just want to see you again." He had tried to resurrect the dead countless times, but failure was his only reward. He felt utterly hopeless, lost in a void of regret. But then, Tessu discovered a new possibility. he realized that intense gravity could potentially warp the very fabric of time and space. That's it. Time. He became obsessed with returning to the moment before the zoo was lost forever. Using gravity as his core, he began a series of dangerous experiments. Combining 14,589 different abilities, he laid waste to entire regions and nearly died dozens of times. But finally, Tetsu succeeded in turning back the clock. However, there was a fatal flaw. No matter what he did, he could never reach the specific point in time he desired. He could never get back to the days before the zoo died. Was the timeline severed, or was the gate permanently closed? He couldn't understand why it was failing. There had to be a way, a single path that would allow him to truly rewrite the past. He exhausted every method he could imagine, leaping through time, over and over again. Yet, every single attempt ended in the same crushing failure. He'd finally reached his breaking point and stopped. In his mind, every bit of this misery was Jang's fault. Tetsu swore he'd end Jang before his own life faded. No, he would never die. Just like that, Tetsu regressed through time, countless times. He clashed with Daiwai in endless battles. Yet, without fail, he was slaughtered every single time. But the timing was never under his control. The only absolute truth was meeting Jang in the final showdown and being executed. Once more, Tetsu found himself back at the headquarters of the Gungan Guild. It was the day the news reported the Bloodgate incident. Just like before, he smashed the TV. Tetsu's lips curled into a smug grin. He cried out in pure ecstasy, "I did it. I've returned." But within 24 hours, the city was once again drowned in a sea of blood. Death claimed him again. This marked the 138th time he fell to Jang. During his very first return, Tetsu had met Yuman. She knew his every secret. Back then, she had revealed so much to Tetsu. In a later regression, Tetsu pinned Yuman against the wall, demanding answers about Kong, Dui, and Hell's power. Confused, Yuman simply asked, "What?" Tetsu shouted desperately, "I can reverse time. You're the one who told me everything." "Just who the hell are you? Did you know I'd end up like this?" But Yuman merely shook her head, looking troubled and uncertain. "No," yet she whispered from the shadows, "I'll tell you the truth." Almin revealed her power was reading and mending the flow of life. As her power surged and evolved, she began to perceive a much grander. From sensing wind and water, her vision expanded until she could feel the earth, the moon, and the very vibrations of the solar system. That wasn't all. Almin realized her cosmic awareness had evolved so much she could even perceive the fabric of dimensions. In its final stage, her power allowed her to witness the very birth and eventual destruction. Entire planets. She had seen the Futura dark reality where Jang emerges from the gate to bring about the world's end. No matter the path, death was inevitable. Everything was futile. That was why Yuman lived such a reckless. Yuman paused, a heavy silence hanging between them, before she finally found the words to continue. "But in all my visions, I've never seen an anomaly." Tetsu's brow furrowed in deep suspicion at her words. "Why should I trust you?" Tetsu growled. Yuman replied coolly. "Why wouldn't you? If I lied, you'd just regress and torture me." Biting his lip until it bled, Tetsu snarled in fury. "Then shut your mouth and just tell me what I need to know. How do I kill that bastard Kang Jang?" Yuman's expression darkened. After a long silence, she whispered, "That is impossible." Just like the countless times Jang had beheaded him, burning resentment. Then, the regression would trigger again. He was trapped in an infinite circular loop of death that seemed to have no end. Jang Dy had already mastered the terrifying powers of hell itself. No matter Tetsu's strength, or how many times he regressed, no amount of mana could change his inevitable fate. Whenever the sky turned blood red, Jang would execute him. This was now the 138th time. Even after regressing to torture human for answers, her story never changed. Killing Jang was truly an impossible feat. But Taesu didn't give a damn. Driven by madness, he continued to throw himself back into the past, 6 years back, to the day the sky bled. The earliest point he could return to was the moment he pushed Jang into the blood gate. Amidst the thunderous cheers of the oblivious crowd, he wondered if saving Jang's mother would change things, but non-awakeners were beyond saving. Not even human could change their fate. Eventually, he reached a grim conclusion. The only way to end this nightmare was to secure Jang's death. Over 6 years of regression, Taesu slaughtered every awakener on Earth to absorb their mana. He even sealed every blood gate before Jang's arrival. This forced Jang to face him alone. The moment the gate flickered open, Taesu obliterated it instantly. But Jang was an absolute monster. He continuously regenerated, slaughtering Taesu in every single encounter that followed. Taesu even tried sealing Jang in a diamond, but Jang simply shattered it and claimed his life again. Even when Taesu attempted to blow up the Earth, Jang sliced through the entire planet to stop him and end his life. Taesu even cast Jang into the crushing depths of black holes, yet he escaped every time to deliver a killing blow. It all stemmed from Taesu killing Jang's mother and trapping him in that gate. As long as that sin existed, his death was inevitable. After enduring such soul-crushing despair for so long, Taesu finally snapped, screaming in agony, "End this nightmare." But time ignored his pleas and regressed once more. After thousands of regressions, one truth remained. Killing Jang was a feat that even time could not achieve. Just as Yuman foretold, she witnessed a grim future where Jang emerges from the portal, annihilate the world. Every word she spoke was the cold, hard truth. Once this nightmare began, Taesu endured 6 years of pure agony. No matter the timeline, Jang would always reappear to claim his life again. Desperate to escape his demise, Taesu triggered a regression. After countless loops, a sudden realization struck him regarding the path to ending Jang. Taesu finally understood his fatal flaw. He had always fought this war as a lone wolf in his quest for vengeance. That was the core issue. He had never opened his heart or shared his burdens with anyone except for you. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Could everything change if he finally stopped carrying the weight of the world alone? Harboring this hope, Taesu leaped back through time once more. This time, he chose a different path. He shed no blood, and Korea's strongest hunters remained alive. Instead of killing, Taesu revealed the entire harrowing truth of his journey to everyone across the globe. From the murder of Jang's mother to his infinite cycles of rebirth, not a single detail was left out. His confession complete, Taesu pleaded for their strength. At first, the world stood paralyzed in utter shock at his tale. Suspicion clouded their faces. Meanwhile, Uman stood by his side, listening to his every word in heavy, meaningful silence. Standing firm, Taesu utilized the wisdom gained from 1,000 lifetimes to bridge the gap of distrust and convince them. The lives he had once sacrificed for power were no longer just faceless ghosts. They weren't just nameless victims to him. Each had a story and a life once lived beside him. In this moment, Taesu began to commune with their lingering mana. They had become a part of his very being. Conversing with them felt like an echo within his own soul. He wondered just how many eons had truly passed in this endless cycle of time. No matter how many times he rewound the clock, you remained a fading memory. He could never truly reach her again. After reconciling with the voices within, he could finally face the mirrors of his past and the choices he had made. The sheer cruelty of his past actions weighed heavily on him. That was exactly why he couldn't afford to waste another second. The blood gate groaned open once again. He swore that no one would have to endure the agony of losing loved ones ever again. Those now standing beside him were the very people he had slaughtered in previous timelines. Each regression, he refused to let history repeat itself. More than anything, Taesu wanted to apologize to Jang, even knowing the cycle was far from over. This would only end with Jang's final breath. Once more, Taesu prepared to face his eternal nemesis in a final showdown. But this time, he wasn't alone. A global alliance of hunters stood at his back, ready to defy destiny together. Yet, it was a massive miscalculation. As the dust of battle settled, only Jang and Taesu were left standing amidst the ruins. Taesu had poured his soul into mastering every one of Jang's lethal movements and attack patterns. Through endless combat in previous lives, he had trained these hunters to exploit every one of Jang's weaknesses. They fought as one, a united front against a god. But even after 10,000 attempts, the result remained futile. One by one, the heroes fell. Just as Yuman warned, Jang was an immortal force, and despair began to swallow Taesu whole. Was this struggle truly for nothing? He could only offer a silent apology to the fallen, and even so, he couldn't escape his fate. As he closed his eyes to accept death, the rhythmic drip of fresh blood hit the earth, but the expected pain never came. Someone had shielded him, the very mother who once called him a monster and abandoned him in fear. There she stood, a fragile barrier against Jang's devastating claws, protecting the son she had once forsaken. His voice trembled as he whispered a single, broken word. Hearing that word, Jang's eyes narrowed with cold malice. He let out a sharp, mocking sneer. "So, this is your mother." Her face was a mask of tragedy, tears streaming down her cheeks. Before she could utter a word, Jang's hand tore through her chest. The gruesome sight was hauntingly familiar, causing a cold shiver to run down Taesu's spine as horror unfolded. He was now tasting the exact same bitterness he had once forced upon Jang. His mother's life had been a cage built of political duty. Since childhood, she was groomed for a cold, flawless perfection. It was a hollow and ruthless existence. Yet, she never uttered a single complaint. To her, perfection wasn't just a goal, it was the absolute law of her life. But the emotions she had buried so deep eventually drove her toward one imperfect choice. It was the trap of love. During her first year of university, she fell for a senior student. That fleeting romance left her pregnant and alone, discarded by her lover and disowned by her own family. That was the heavy price she paid for her one moment of weakness. To her, Taesu's brother became an undeniable mark of failure. From that dark moment onward, she vowed to maintain a facade of absolute perfection, even in the face of love. But what was this? In all his countless cycles through time, Taesu had never once crossed paths with her. Until now. Was it because he seemed so flawless? Or was she here simply to seek the mercy of a perfect death? The moment Jang struck down his mother, Taesu lost it. His eyes fractured with a denial so deep it bordered on madness. Biting his lip until it bled, silent tears carved paths through his grief-stricken face. Finally, the agony became too much to bear. Eventually, as the crushing weight of sorrow consumed his entire being, Taesu turned back with a twisted grin. The mother who abandoned him was now dead. Under a gloom-choked sky stained the color of blood, he whispered hoarsely, "Is this how you felt all along?" Kang Jang, with a broken voice, Taesu began to confess every dark secret of his journey to Jang, the infinite loops, the endless deaths, and his own wretched realization. Kneeling at Jang's feet, he trembled. "I won't ever turn back time again. I am so sorry, Kang Jang. I truly committed unspeakable, cruel atrocities against you. I am truly sorry." But after hearing his plea, Jang only offered a cold, piercing gaze. "Why did you do it to my mother?" It was a question Jang had burned to ask for ages. But voicing it now only deepened the hollow ache in his heart. Taesu found no words to answer. For a long moment under that oppressive sky, only his hollow. Wretched laughter echoed through the air. Having witnessed his own mother's demise right before his eyes, Taesu finally grasped the true depth of that agony. realizing just how monstrous his past actions truly were. He looked up at Jang, whispering, "I don't even know." Before he could finish, his head rolled from his shoulders. He was dead. In that final moment, there was no regret, only a profound sense of relief. At last, the nightmare was finally over. It had been such an agonizingly long journey. His wretched existence had finally reached its end. He felt truly blessed that Jang was the one to kill him. But his eyes snapped open back at the Bloodgate again. Taisu had returned once more. With a heavy, mournful sigh, he resolved to simply end his own life again. Manifesting a blade of hardened diamond, he ruthlessly brought it down upon his own neck. Yet, the loop persisted. Driven to the brink of insanity, he snatched a nearby weapon and ended his life again, right there. But the cycle reset, regardless. The jubilant cheers of the crowd only fueled the madness clawing at his mind. He was lost in confusion. Why did he keep returning to this exact day? Even after taking his own life? Why was he trapped in this eternal return? Finally, he couldn't help but scream a curse. "Damn it all, to hell." He screamed toward the heavens, "What more do you want from me?" He claimed his sudden enlightenment was nothing but a hollow act. He figured dying with a shred of dignity would be nice, that's all. But so what? Taisu did not want to live. He craved the abyss of death. Buried in grief, he covered his face and wept bitterly. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the world. Yet Taisu regressed again. Surrounded by the same faces, he let out a maddened roar. "Why do I keep coming back?" At that exact moment, Yumin appeared from the shadows. "Calm down." Seeing her, a desperate flicker of hope. Clinging to her, he begged with a trembling voice. "Li Yumin, tell me, what is happening?" Before he could finish, Yumin's voice cut through like ice. "It is an infinite temporal inversion. Mana has accumulated too heavily upon the fabric of time. Taisu's karma has twisted reality until time itself has folded shut. Now, every death will only reset you to this moment. And for the next 6 years, Jang will kill you no matter what." Amun leaned in close, her words sharp and deliberate. "Do you understand now? You are destined to die an infinite number of times, over and over." Taisu's pupils dilated in pure shock. "What? What are you talking about? That's impossible." Gritting his teeth in a desperate fury, Yumin let out a mocking smirk, whispering her identity into his ear. Taisu's face paled, turning ghastly. Finally, he broke into a hollow, tragic laugh. He was trapped in the past forever, while the world continued to turn. And at that very moment, at the edge of the horizon, a sudden flash of light flickered and vanished. Like a soul erased from existence forever. While Taisu was trapped in his loop, the world outside remained bathed in crimson. A massive bloodgate materialized behind Jang. Moments later, a skeletal figure began to crawl out from the depths of the portal. The surrounding monsters were instantly seized by terror, dropping to their knees in a subservient line. Witnessing this, Dejong froze in shock. In the blink of an eye, the monsters vanished, leaving the world drenched in a haunting, blood-red hue. Suddenly, a silhouette drifted silently. Startled by the sound, Jang spun around, only to find Yumin standing right there. Embracing him from behind, she whispered, "You did well." PA is the absolute ruler of hell. For eternity, he razed entire worlds to the ground, until he lost all sense of self and purpose. With only ruin left behind, an overwhelming wave of loneliness suddenly crashed over his hollow heart. He desperately tried to create life, but failed repeatedly until he tore out his heart to create a daughter. You will exist as another piece of his very soul. Realization dawned on Jang as he trembled. Could it be you? Uman held him tighter and calmly confessed, "But, as you can see, I am human. Surviving in the depths of hell was impossible for me. And so, I was cast away the very moment I was born." 4 billion years ago, amidst Earth's ruins. But Pael's heart kept me tethered across dimensions. I was doomed to revive endlessly, unable to meet him until this world faced destruction once more. I spent eons alone, consumed by isolation and spite. No one could fathom what humanity truly meant to me. After living in silence for so long, I finally crossed paths with others of your kind. I learned to love, casting aside my solitude to bask in brief moments of pure happiness. But time was my enemy. My loves withered away. I loved again, bore children, and watched generations perish. I accepted the goodbyes, always meeting new souls, in this endless, exhausting cycle. Through the ages, countless lovers died while I remained. Once again, that familiar loneliness began to swallow me whole. I endured unimaginable agony throughout my life. Yet this crushing isolation was the one thing I could never conquer. Only then did I understand my father. Pael had tried to escape it, even by ripping out his heart. This void was too unbearable. I simply could not accept living like this any longer. That was when his heart showed me the future, the only path where I could finally reunite with him. To do so, I had to ignite the Bloodgate's wrath. Through you. Hearing this, Jang gasped in disbelief. What? Jang stammered. She explained how he transcended his monstrous form to escape hell, tearing a rift through space. I witnessed every possible future, and you were the only one capable of achieving such a feat. Confusion clouded Jang's mind. So, you were just using me as a tool all this time. He hesitated, then asked if she was behind his parents' fate. Omen gave a slow, cold nod. Yes. That single word ignited Jang's fury, but Yuman calmly raised a finger to his brow, instantly shattering his monstrous outer shell into 1,000 pieces. The future I foresaw ends here, she said coldly. Jang collapsed, his voice trembling as he hurled insults. Damn you, he hissed, but she'd cut him off. For you, I gave Tisu the most agonizing death imaginable. He is now trapped in an infinite loop, dying over and over again. Jang's frustration boiled over as he screamed. She sighed. You won't understand, but it's ending. Once I'm in Pael's dimension, death is finally possible. If I perish there, he dies too. The day I felt his loneliness, I vowed to find him and burn this world to ash. I will drag him into the abyss of death along with me. Without hesitation, she ripped out her own heart. Blood sprayed everywhere as she sought to break the cycle of solitude. Jang stood nearby, his face splattered with her blood, yet he was no different from her in his suffering. No matter your pain, clinging to life for your mother wasn't love it. It was like walking alone through a freezing downpour, a sensation of pure, hollow despair. Love is a cruel deception, a fragile illusion masking soul cracks that numbs the pain. Truly heals it. It is a curse disguised as salvation. But now, the tragedy of your life finally comes to an end. In that heartbeat, Jang's eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror. As Yuman tore her heart out, Pael's screams made him shudder. Before vanishing, she whispered, Father ... do you hate me? Pao offered a gentle smile. What are you saying? You are my daughter, a part of me. How could I ever hate you? Hearing this, Yumin felt truly satisfied. She closed her eyes, waiting for death to take her. But Diang, watching them slowly vanish, felt a surge of rage. What the hell are those two doing? They used him to kill Jang's parents and wipe out the world. This is insane. Why did they even do all of this? Was it really just because they were lonely? Diang found the reason. Pael had actually turned him back into a human after he became a monster. With that power, he could bring his mother back. Thinking this, Jang reached out and seized Yumin's heart. In that split second, he remembered the final words Lucas had left for him before vanishing. Please, don't lose faith until the end. But screw that. Jang seized the moment to claim that ultimate power. They wanted a peaceful death, not a chance. That heart was his for the taking. Yang shoved the heart into his mouth, devouring it. That power... Give it all to me, he roared. All three sank deep into the crimson sea. Seeing this, Yumin could only let out a heavy sigh. Jang, you're just a normal human now. There is no way you can absorb Palo's divine power. As she spoke, Jang let out a primal scream. Suddenly, a pillar of light erupted from Earth into the galaxy. In an instant, swirling threads of mana began to shroud everything. Omen trembled. No, stop. Don't you realize? You can't escape the loneliness without death, and neither can I. Jang wasn't listening. He gave a cold snort. No. I am going to see my mother again. He absorbed all of Pyle's power as mana threads wove around his body like a cocoon. Before sinking into the crimson sea, Yumin watched Jang vanish. She finally realized this was the future she'd seen. Now, Jang had completely transformed. His eyes were consumed by a web of blood-red veins. A massive surge of power exploded, covering the skies of Korea before spreading across the entire world. Sparks of fire ignited everywhere. With a thunderous boom, the entire Earth was obliterated. To the vast galaxy, it was just a tiny flicker. Earth vanished completely into the void of space. However, within a realm of absolute darkness, a lone skeleton appeared in the shadows. Suddenly, a spark of life flickered in its eyes. The skeleton found it could move. It looked down, surprised to see it still had hands and feet. It was confused, unable to remember its purpose, or even its own identity. It stood there staring at its limbs. The silence of the void grew more terrifying around the gaunt skeleton. Suddenly, mysterious mana threads wrapped around it. Finally, it remembered it was Pao, the absolute lord of hell. He emerged from the blood gates, his strength fueled by the infinite mana within them. Pao was a being who could destroy worlds. But, with the gates closed, the cycle of Pyle began again. For an eternity, he had continuously leveled entire worlds into nothing but dust. Pyle had lost his sense of self and the reason for his actions. Only destruction and ruin remained. Suddenly, a wave of loneliness hit him. Pyle tried to create life, but he failed every single time. In one last attempt, he tore out his own heart to create a daughter. She would live as his second self. Pao cast her out of the gate to live in eternal solitude. Everything began to repeat. The daughter tried to open the gate, creating the awakened to torment the weak. Scumbags, like Tae-soo, rose to the very top of the food chain. Tragedy followed tragedy, like a film on loop. Jang's mother was beaten into a vegetative state. Yang was cast into the blood gates, suffering until he became a monster and met Yu. She offered him a job, promising to heal his mother in exchange for his service. Every word was a trap set by Yumin to lure Yang back into Pao's grasp within the void, all to orchestrate the fated meeting between Yang and Pyle. To let him destroy the world. It was all a human trap, pushing everyone toward eternal damnation. Life itself had become a pitch-black nightmare.